Good evening. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Wilmette Plan Commission. Mr. Adler, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Greeno.
Here.
Ms. Gamey.
Here.
Mr. Head. Mr. Schwab.
Here.
Mr. Shepard.
Here.
Mr. Taylor.
Here.
Chairman Bradford.
Here. For those of you who are new to our proceedings, the purpose of this commission is to review proposed plats of subdivision and consolidation, planned unit development, special uses, and zoning and comprehensive plan amendments. Because the commission will be hearing a planned unit development tonight, the staff has prepared a PowerPoint presentation about the PUD process. And before I ask you to go through that, I'm going to go through a number of other housekeeping items here. The Plan Commission is a fact-finding board. We hear testimony and we make a recommendation to the village board. The village board ultimately has the decision to either approve or reject the recommendation of the Plan Commission. So that later on, if you're planning on speaking, we will ask you to be sworn in. The proceedings that we're going to follow tonight is after Mr. Adler gives a sort of an overview of the PUD process. He will also report out on a meeting that was held with the Appearance Review Commission last night. It was an advisory meeting. The next step is that we will ask the petitioner to make their presentation to talk about the development. After they have made their presentation, then we will invite members of the audience to come and speak, either for and against the application. After we've heard testimony from anybody who wishes to speak, we will then entertain a motion to put the matter formally for us. At that point, there will be no more discussion from the audience. The commission will debate among themselves, vote, make a recommendation to the village board. Because of the complexity of the case this evening, I do not anticipate that we're going to be able to conclude the discussion this evening. So I'm setting a timeline for our discussions this evening to conclude no later than 10:30 p.m. We will, in more than likely, continue the case until our next meeting in January, or February rather, which is February the 4th.
Correct.
So anybody who is here this evening who wishes to speak, regardless of where we are in the presentation, I guarantee you, you will allow to be able to make your comments either at tonight's meeting or in the February meeting. So the Plan Commission will not make a decision until we've had a chance to hear from everybody who wishes to comment on the case. So having said that, Mr. Adler, if you'd sort of go through the PUD process for us.
Sure. And this PowerPoint, there are copies of it available on the table. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. Many of you are probably familiar with the plan unit development process in Wilmette. It's a process which offers flexibility in the development review process. It combines the zoning board, the plan commission, and the appearance review commission review in one process. It's actually heard as a special use by the plan commission, with the final approval resting with the village board. Typically, for relief to be granted as a part of the plan unit development, public benefits need to be shown. It's up to the applicant to determine what process they want to follow, whether they want to go through a typical zoning process, where they're asking for a variation where you would be required to show a hardship, or if you would like to go through the plan unit development process where, again, you'll have to prove that your request is meeting a number of standards, but also showing some sort of public benefit that justifies the relief that you're requesting. The complete plan unit development process is in Chapter 6 of the Wilmette Code. The handout does have the purpose section, and typically it's It's to encourage flexibility in the development of process in a project. In Wilmette, the plan unit development process is divided into 3 phases. There is a pre-application meeting. There is a preliminary approval phase. That's where we're at tonight. Again, the Plan Commission will make a recommendation to the village board. If there is a positive recommendation and the village board concurs, there would be a final approval process, and that is a process that's before the village board. It doesn't come back before the Plan Commission. During this phase, we're going to, as Chairman Bradford mentioned, we're going to receive a presentation from the applicant. We're going to take public testimony, and ultimately the Plan Commission is going to deliberate and formulate a recommendation to the village board. As Chairman Bradford mentioned, there's a good chance that that would take place at the next meeting on February 4th. The village board will also receive the presentation from the applicant and will take public testimony also. What is considered a public benefit? As mentioned, the applicant must demonstrate a substantial benefit to the village in order to receive relief from the zoning requirements. The zoning ordinance lists a number of permissible benefits. I've listed them on the PowerPoint, including community amenities like plazas, formal gardens, outdoor seating, preservation of historically significant structures, adaptive reuse, preservation of environmental features, public open space, innovative stormwater management, affordable or senior housing set-asides, and provision of accessible dwelling units beyond what is required by the building code. Optima submitted their preliminary plan unit development application on November 22nd. That application was put up and posted on the village website. Actually, prior to that, when they submitted their pre-application meeting, a couple of information that was put up on the village website also. The meeting's taking place. The primary question before the Plan Commission is to review the zoning relief requested and determine whether the public benefit provided meets the village standards per the zoning ordinance. As we know, it's being broadcast on WCTV and will be archived on the village website for viewing in the future. The soonest this would go to the village board would be February 11th. Again, as Chairman Bradford mentioned, that probably won't be likely, and it would most likely the soonest, if there's a meeting February 4th, would be February 25th or the second Tuesday in March. This is a list of the public benefits as presented by Optima. They include, as presented, that the building will be designed to achieve sustainability certification by Green Globes. It's going to improve on stormwater management. And then they proposed a plan on how to create additional affordable housing using a $1.6 million donation, which they will go into further detail in their presentation. In addition, they list other items that they feel are a public benefit, including retail facilities that serve the needs of the residents, increase of density in the village center, and again, there's a number of additional items which they feel are the public benefits of this project, and they are listed in the PowerPoint, and I'm sure they will further talk about them in their presentation. The modification that Optima is looking to receive, they're looking for building height modification. This area of the village center has a maximum height of 52 feet, 4 stories. They're asking for, at the main roof, 62 feet, 6 stories. There's a terrace, which is in the center of the building, centered in the building, that's 63 feet. There's a penthouse roof that would be 72.66 feet and considered the 7th story. There's mechanical equipment that would exceed the 58 feet maximum, and they're asking that at 69.17. And the last height variation is the elevator housing, which is 64 feet maximum, and they're asking for 81 feet. The ground floor height, there is a minimum of 14 feet for that. They're asking that it be allowed to be at 13 feet. The front yard setback on the Green Bay Road, there's a minimum of 5 feet. Well, they'll meet that on the ground level. They're asking for a variation to have 0 feet above. There's fence height variation. It's 6.5 feet. They're asking for 7.5 feet. There's, excuse me, they're asking to have more first floor common area than the ordinance provides for. They're asking for management office at the first floor. That would typically be a special use in this district at the first floor. They're asking for residential dwelling units on the first floor. They're requesting relief to allow these next types of relief are design relief, that a building that above 1 story evidences a bottom, middle, and top. There's a relief that the linear roof lines of a building be no greater than 25 feet. They're asking for relief of that. They're asking for relief of 1 pedestrian access path. They do have a pedestrian access from their parking directly to street level, so that meets the intent of the requirement. And they're asking for relief on the Central Avenue side to the requirement that there be 40% clear glass on that side. I think there's an additional relief that the applicant's going to talk about that they're one asked for based on some of the input from the Appearance Review Commission last night. As Chairman Bradford mentioned, the Appearance Review Commission had an advisory meeting. Typically, the Appearance Review Commission isn't involved in a plan unit development request. They were asked to take a look at this. In general, they spoke positive about it. There was a commissioner that liked the building aesthetically. Another commissioner talked about the diverse architectural styles in the village and felt that the building had nice scale. Another commission felt that it was would be a great addition to the village. There was a commissioner who questioned how the applicant arrived at the building's architectural style, as it's a very modern design compared to other buildings in the village. The majority of the commissioners had a concern about the length of the fencing wall along Central. That's about 120 feet. The applicant was encouraged to relocate, if possible, amenity space to that area so that the facade might be able to contain more transparency. Currently, there's residential dwellings there, and the fence and the wall is put up there for privacy. One of the commissioners encouraged the applicant to find a use for, that would provide a benefit to the community in place of the proposed residential use along Central. If they're concerned about that space not being space that would be good for commercial use. They were encouraged to pull the fencing back from the corner at the alley and Central to give a better sightline distance there. There was also a suggestion to set back the unit slightly from Central Avenue, and I think that might be in part of the relief that they're going to be adding to the request. There was a commissioner who felt that the 14-foot height should be maintained, in that that height is important to the pedestrian feel of the structure. Most of the entire commission really felt that, given that this is a predominantly glass building, that the glass that's selected has to be correct, and it's very important. They talked about the bronze color, the acoustical qualities, and the impact on migrating birds. And they felt it was important to pay particular attention to the glass and stone wall to make sure the actual materials reflect what is depicting in the renderings. That concludes my presentation.
Good. Very good. Thank you. So moving forward, if you plan on speaking this evening, I'd like to swear everybody in. If you are planning on speaking, would you raise your right hand? And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. You're now duly sworn. Mr. Adler, would you formally call the case, please?
This is case 2019 P3, 1210 Central. It's a planning unit development request by Optima Wilmette for an approximate 108-unit dwelling, a mixed-use dwelling in the VC district, pedestrian commercial west.
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission and staff, and also thank you to all the members of the community who are here. We appreciate the opportunity to present.
Just for the record, would you identify yourself, please?
Sorry. My name is Mark Siegel. I'm a senior vice president with Optima. So we appreciate very much the opportunity to present our plan to you. I'm here with a number of our team members who will share in the presentation this evening. In addition to myself, I'm joined by my colleagues Bill Duke and Matt Sison of Optima, Steve Bauer of Meltzer, Pertil and Stell, our zoning attorney, Luea Buna, the president of KLOA, which is our traffic consultant, Rob Anthony, who's the president of Community Partners for Affordable Housing, Fran Fazio and Taylor Corbin from our civil engineer, Manhard, and Scott Reinisch and Tim Rasmussen from SVN Chicago Commercial, who has been working with us on our retail strategy. I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of an overview of Optima, who we are and what we've done. Optima was founded a little bit more than 40 years ago by David C. Hovey and Eileen Hovey. We started as a family business. We've continued as a family-owned business. Our focus is on doing multifamily rental and condominium projects, ground-up construction, as well as mixed-use developments. We were founded here in the Chicago area, and we currently have offices in both Glencoe and Scottsdale, Arizona. We operate in those two markets exclusively because we're a vertically integrated organization. We do everything internally at Optima. We are the developer, we are the architect, we are the general contractor, and we are the operator of the property. David Hovey is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. David founded Optima to give life to the vision architectural vision that he has, and so we're very much a design-led firm. Everything we do is focused on creating placemaking, creating a distinctive development to meet the unique characteristics of every site and every community in which we operate. Over our past 40-plus years, we've developed more than 30 projects and more than 3,000 residential units. 6,000 residential units over 30 projects of varying scales. Most of those projects have won awards. We've received over 45 national and international architectural design awards for the projects that we have created. One of the things that the family has focused on is being a longtime stakeholder in the community. Our current intention is for this development to be an apartment community, and the family intends to be a long-term holder of this asset. We're excited because this is the opportunity for Optima to create our fourth development here in the village of Wilmette. We've created 3 prior condominium projects here in Wilmette, going back to 1991 when we created 1618 Sheridan Road, which had 35,000 total gross square footage, 8 condominiums at an average size of 2,645 square feet. In 1997, we opened Optima Center Wilmette, 140,555 total gross square footage, 20,000 square feet of street retail, and 54 condominiums with an average size of 1,389 square feet. And most recently, in 1998, we created Lake Courts, which has 44 condominiums and 5,000 square feet of commercial space. We're here tonight before you to ask for a special use permit to authorize a planned unit development and preliminary planned unit development plan approval with associated exceptions. I'd like to orient you to the site we have here. As you can see on the screen, that works there. We are the red dot right there. We are at the corner, the northwest corner of Central Avenue and Green Bay Road. It is the current International Bank of Chicago site. Across the street from us is the Lawrence Dean's location and the associated retail facility there on the south side of Central Avenue. To our immediate north is the Imperial Motor site. Across the street from us to the east is the Metra train station. And immediately behind us is an alley that runs from Central Avenue to Washington Street. And on the other side of that alley is the Wilmette Village Commons townhome development, which represents the only residential development immediately adjacent to our site. I'd like to now show you the existing site conditions. What we decided to do here was basically take you down the Green Bay Road frontage, if you can see that. We're starting at Green Bay and Wilmette Road. You can see the residence of Wilmette structure there. We're continuing to move along northbound along Green Bay Road as we move across the photos. There you can start to see the Lawrence Dean's retail facility there. Continuing on down. Here we've got a view west down Central Avenue. So this is basically right outside of the Village Hall, looking down at our site. Getting closer to the train crossing there, looking west across the train tracks on Central Avenue. And then here you have us northwest at the intersection of Central Avenue and Green Bay Road. This is a view of the site east from Central Avenue and Park Avenue. Looking east there at the rear of the International Bank of Chicago site. Here you can see along the Central Avenue frontage of the International Bank of Chicago, there are two curb cuts that currently exist on the site. There is this one right here, which provides access to the parking lot as well as access to the drive-through location. On the other side of these trees, right about here, is where the egress is for the drive-through for the bank. As part of our plan, you'll see we're going to be eliminating that curb cut as well as the curb cut you see down here along Green Bay Road. So there will be no curb cuts on our development. So we see that as a great benefit to focus to segregate pedestrian and vehicular traffic as part of our development. All of the access will be coming in off of the alley. Here again, you're looking from the Metro station across to the bank site. This is a zoning map showing the location. We're in the Village Center zoning district. This R2 is the townhome development that I mentioned, and then surrounding that, you have some single-family homes on the periphery here. So when we envisioned what we were going to do with this site, we were very much focused on how we could further the plans that the village has in both the comprehensive plan and the Village Center District Master Plan. As part of that, we're focused on fulfilling the goals of encouraging retail facilities that serve the needs of village residents, providing a housing option that complements the single-family character of the village, providing for non-single-family detached housing options, providing market-rate multifamily housing for older residents of the village who want to remain in the village, encouraging the redevelopment of underutilized commercial facilities, and providing an attractive appearance along the public way. In terms of the goals and policies of the Village Center Master Plan, we want to provide new residential uses that will support and help sustain an active village center, provide higher density multifamily residential opportunities that support current and future lifestyle needs of the community, maintaining a balanced retail environment and experience that consists of independent retailers and restaurants, providing a well-integrated design strategy with increased density with little impact on surrounding residential single-family neighborhoods, provide for continued streetscape and open space improvements, achieving a critical mass of energy and market activity that will support existing and future businesses in the village center, promoting the development of a vacant and underutilized parcel of land, creating a development that is not a big box and not a drive-through, creating an opportunity for first floor retail on Green Bay Road, providing open spaces, public and private, and streetscape environment, helping to create a new, vibrant, and economically sustainable village center, increasing the village center's recognition as a desirable place to live and shop, helping further the development and improvement of other high-quality development in the village center, promoting a mixed-use commercial environment, and providing a new high-density opportunity for multifamily housing. And we're asking that you approve our planned unit development proposal. Here we move to a site context image that again gives you a little bit of relationship to what's happening at the site. This is our site here, again at the northwest corner of Central Avenue and Green Bay Road. We have the metro station here, the Imperial Motors development here with the Starbucks at the corner. You have a fitness establishment here, an office tower here. The bank location, as I indicated, is here. The commercial space with Lawrence Deans at the corner is here. There's an antique store here. Residences of Wilmette is located here. There are parking lots, including a village-owned parcel here. This is the alley extending from Central to Washington, and here you see the townhome development behind the property. The property has 175.47 feet of frontage on Green Bay Road and 240.68 feet of frontage on Central Avenue. The property is approximately 42,167 square feet. We have a lot coverage of 30,400 square feet. Give you some statistics about the development. As Mr. Adler indicated, this is a mixed-use, transit-oriented development. We have 108 residential units planned, approximately 7,347 square feet of ground floor commercial space that is along the Green Bay Road frontage and wraps around the corner onto Central Avenue. We've provided for 200 below-grade parking spaces. Of that, 177 of those spaces will be dedicated to residential use, and 23 of those spaces will be open to public parking. And then we have proposed to have a 62-foot tall building to the main building roof. As I indicated, our goal is to create a distinctive development for the village of Wilmette. We're trying to create a distinctive home for our future residents that provides them with the services of a boutique hotel. Our objective is to create a residential community and a development that is sophisticated, timeless, and comfortable for our residents and a great asset to the community. I'll give you an overview of some of the designer finishes that we will have on the interior of our units. We're affording our residents the opportunity of custom painting of their homes, 9-foot ceilings, outdoor terraces and courtyards, designer kitchen cabinetry and lighting, quartz and granite kitchen countertops and islands, laminate plank style wood flooring, designer baths with porcelain tile flooring, quartz granite vanity top, double bowls in the masters, Walk-in master closet with a laminate shelving system, same with a linen and secondary closet system, and offering smart technology in these homes. The current plan for the amenities, which are located in the first floor surrounding an interior landscaped courtyard and on a roof deck, include an indoor pool and spa on the roof deck, furnished landscaped courtyard and roof terraces, controlled access reception lobby with a concierge, a residence club with multiple social areas, a rooftop demonstration kitchen and party room, lounge, coffee bar, and co-working space, a pet spa, dedicated dog park, conference room with media technology, secured bicycle storage and repair room, a fitness center, electric car charging stations, storage rooms, and on-site leasing and management office. We also are very focused on the services that we deliver as an operating company to our residents. Among the services we'll be providing are Optima Connect, which is our affinity program where we work with retailers in the communities we operate in to provide benefits to our residents for shopping at those locations. An Optimized Service, which is an in-home concierge program that provides complimentary services to our residents, including dry cleaning, pickup, and delivery to your closet, in-home plant watering, and package delivery inside the home. The final amenity that we're looking to provide to our residents as well as the broader community is the retail offerings that this development will provide. And our focus right now is to try and identify a restaurant use for the corner of Green Bay and Central. While we think that there are many market needs that this development will address, a lot of discussion in the Village Center Master Plan that was discussed, as well as what we found in the marketplace, is that there's a need for more housing in the Village Center to both increase support for local businesses and to provide housing options for seniors, empty nesters, divorced parents, and young couples. And that we will help energize and make the Village Center more of a 24-hour location. Now I'd like to walk you through the first floor of the plan. So just to orient you here, the red spaces are commercial. The light orange spaces here are residential. This darker orange is amenity space. Here we have an interior courtyard, and here we have a lobby and lounge area. I'd like to talk a little bit, Mr. Adler alluded to the meeting we had last night with the Appearance Review Commission. We were really pleased with the interaction we had with both the commissioners and the residents who were present. And so part of the reason we've provided you with an updated set of plans today is because we've already incorporated some of the ideas that were presented at the Appearance Review Commission last night. One of the benefits of our being a vertically integrated operation is we took what was discussed last night and immediately translated it into the plans. So one of the issues that was discussed was a safety concern view corridor here at this corner coming off of the alleyway. And I'll get into this as well in the landscaping plan. But what we've done here is we've cut back the stone wall, that garden wall that was running all the way to the alley right here. And that's cut back a little over 11 feet from the alley to provide a more clear sight line. We've provided for low-level landscaping in this location and illumination of that landscaping. And because of the concerns expressed by the members of the community, we've also provided for an additional street light to occur right here as well for better illumination of what's happening at that location. One of the other things that came up was the treatment of the stone wall along the Central Avenue corridor. So the other relief that we're asking for that Mr. Adler alluded to is we're looking to shift the entire building 6 inches to the north. So the Central Avenue under the zoning ordinance requires a 0 lot line along Central Avenue. We're looking to push the structure 6 inches to the north so we can create a more effective landscaping strip along that frontage. And you'll see in the renderings as we go through this that you'll see the vines that articulate onto the stone garden wall. I'll highlight these other two issues, and I'll come back to them when we get to the landscaping plan. Two other items that came up in the conversations with the Appearance Review Commission was a concern about the maturity of the trees we would be planting along the frontage. We received a set of comments from the forestry staff here at the village. We had originally proposed a 4-inch caliper tree for all of our street trees. We were asked to reduce that to 2-inch caliper trees. We're going to ask the forestry department in the village to consider allowing us to plant more mature 4-inch caliper trees. That is not reflected in the updated plans that are in front of you, but that is something we think that will further enhance the streetscape of the development. In addition, one other comment that we received is while there's a planting in a great structure along Green Bay Road, and here we were asked to create a grass intersection between the trees planted in this area. A number of the residents who were present at the Appearance Review Commission expressed a concern about the level of the amount of pedestrian traffic that occurs along Central Avenue in that location, commuters, as well as children going to and from school. And so our request is to allow us to go back to the more standard grate system so that this area becomes pedestrian trafficable, where people who would be walking or people with strollers or on bicycles, whatever it may be, it'll be easier for them to interact with each other without creating any problems. So those are the changes that we've incorporated into these plans, as well as additional changes that we'd like to ask based on the feedback that we received at the Appearance Review Commission. If I can turn your attention now to the commercial space. So here we have the commercial space along the Green Bay frontage. It runs the entire length of the building from the north property line towards Central. As we come to Central Avenue, we've provided for a 10-foot setback from Central Avenue. Now, the building overhead exists right here at this line, so we're creating a covered space, and we're as you'll see in the renderings, we think that that's a great use of that space for indoor-outdoor dining use. And then we continue that setback as we go along approximately 5 feet along the Green Bay frontage, again, with the building overhead coming to the property line. So you'll see this entire space allows for indoor-outdoor use of the commercial space. One of the changes that we made is we've dimensioned from what you saw in the prior plan. We've added dimensioning to the retail space, and we've provided for a hypothetical division of the space into two retail uses. We're anticipating that this location here would be adjacent, the southern location would be an ideal restaurant use, and that would have the 42.6 depth, the 95-foot depth off of Central, and then here a 57.6 depth. And then part of what we did to make sure that there wasn't an issue with service by dividing that space was we took some of the residential corridor space that you may have seen previously on the plan, and we converted that into a retail corridor that now turns south to service both these retail uses as well as this retail use over here. And I'll just note that these dimensions are different than the dimensions in the staff report because we provided these dimensions and provided for this retail corridor as the staff report was being issued. One of the things that Mr. Adler referenced was that we have one pedestrian access to the commercial space from parking. Because our parking is all below grade, we've provided for a retail elevator from the public parking that will come up to the center of the retail space here on Green Bay Road with a separate retail elevator lobby, and then coming out here, the expectation is that the access will be off of the frontages. And then finally, this is a service corridor serving the retail use, and here we have a dedicated retail loading dock. All of the trash for the retail will be enclosed within this loading dock. There is an overhead door here at the end to fully enclose it. Continuing on the rear of the building here, this is the loading bay, the 10 by 25 loading bay dedicated to the commercial use. This is the access to the residential and public parking. This is the loading bay for the residential use, and again, an interior residential loading area, and this is the access corridor. Here at the rear of the property, you can see we have a dog run. One of the comments that we received from staff was to make sure that we provided for the requisite 3-foot setback for that dog run required by code. You can see that setback right here is 3 feet. We continue around the rear of the building with courtyard areas for the residential units that are on this floor, and they would be enclosed by the redstone garden wall that will be illustrated later. Here we provide for interior amenity space for the residential units, a management office here, and here we have a lounge and the interior residential courtyard. One of the things you'll see, we've created this courtyard on the north facade because there is a 0 lot line along the north facade. So we needed to plan for there to be some future development on the Imperial Motors site. So what we tried to do is envision what we would want to do if another building was built here. So we've provided for an interior courtyard that will run up the entirety of the building so that units on that courtyard will continue to experience access to light. And you'll see that as we go through the renderings. One of the other things that I'll just note is because of the safety concerns that were expressed at the Appearance Review Commission, as well as feedback from our traffic and parking consultant, we're proposing to have a high visibility crosswalk here to add to additional safety for pedestrians. One other note I'd like to draw your attention to that was called out in the staff report is we've asked for an easement, a below-grade easement, a 5-foot below-grade easement to allow the expansion of the parking garage to accommodate all of the public parking that we've provided for in the plan. And so there's a 5-foot easement that's depicted by this dashed line that runs the entirety of the Central Avenue right-of-way. One of the concerns expressed by the staff was whether or not there was any impact on the parkway trees. And as you can see from the delineation of that easement line, there is no impact on the parkway trees there. And again, here on this facade, we have the stone wall running along here. As you'll see, these are courtyards for these units that would be enclosed by that garden wall. There we go. This is the second floor of the building, all residential here on a double-loaded corridor. One of the things you'll see here is here's the introduction of a series of terraces along each of the 4 facades of the building. And when we show you the renderings, you'll see how those terraces break up the facade of the building as we go up the building. This is the same condition on floors 3 through 5. Here on the 6th residential floor, we have the mechanical room for the pool on the pool deck enclosed here. And then the other thing to note, which we'll highlight for you as well, is the terraces in these locations do not have a roof. And so while we've asked for an exception for the variation in the roof line, we do have a variation in the roof line. It's just not occurring at the 25-foot interval. The break in the covering here of the roof actually creates a differentiation of the roof line that you'll see in the renderings. Here we have the roof plan. So here, again, you see the openings to the terraces below. The orange is an enclosed volume of amenity space, but that volume is set back 35.5 feet from the Central Avenue perimeter of the building. It's set back 57.5 feet from the western side of the building, and it's set back 94.5 feet from the north side of the building, and it's set back approximately 33 feet from the east facade of the building. So what we've tried to do while we're creating this amenity space and this roof deck, we've really drawn it into the interior of the property so that from the street, no one would perceive the existence of that space. We then have walkable terrace area, outdoor terrace area here, as well as 2 roof terraces to the north of that enclosed volume, where we're providing for pergolas to be created no higher than the amenity space on the roof at both of these roof terraces. You can see that we've got the pool and spa, the indoor pool and spa here. This is an enclosure for the HVAC on both the west and the east end of the building. And then we provide for a landscaped perimeter around the entirety of the usable roof space. And as you'll see here, the covered area of this covered area represents only 19% of the entire roof. The roof area grand total is 30,795 square feet, and we've got 5,700 square feet of covered space. One of the other things that we've done here is we've planted trees at the roof on the western facade to serve as a further buffer to our residential neighbors immediately to the west of the property. Here you now see the garage. This is the lower level 1 garage. This is the access coming down into the garage. This lighter area is all public parking. Here you see the retail elevator that will take you up to the retail lobby at grade. And then there is secure entrances here for access into the residential parking, which then goes down to the lower level. At the top of the entrance to the garage, when we show you the elevations, you'll see the overhead door for that and the signage we have for that area. We're looking to have this public parking being of limited duration so it doesn't turn into a commuter parking lot, but rather is something that's available for everyday use for people shopping in the Village Center district. We're really excited about what we're able to do here with this public parking. A lot of the focus of the Village Center Master Plan was not to have dedicated parking for dedicated uses, and we think creating the public parking just creates the flexibility for people working and shopping in the Village Center to take advantage of this additional parking. And this is the lower level 2. This is all residential parking. Again, here you can see the elevator pit for the elevator that is the public parking. Now we get to elevations of the property. This is the east elevation here along Green Bay Road. This is an aluminum glass system, window wall system here for us that provides 100% transparency along Green Bay Road to highlight the commercial uses there and to create an activity and engagement between the pedestrians who will be walking along that frontage and those commercial uses. You can see as well here that we've provided for signage here and here along the glass for the two commercial spaces, and then we've got metal louver bands, painted metal louver bands for ventilation along that frontage. Here you can see the lobby, the elevator lobby entrance there, and again here you see the aluminum and glass window wall system, as well as the aluminum and glass balcony system here. At the top, we've got a mechanical screen wall of light gray metal panels. This is faded because we're trying to give you the sense of the setback of the upper floor from the perimeter of the building. And then here you've got the dark brown aluminum and glass window wall system at the penthouse area, and that is what's continued throughout the entire facade of the building. And so we have the terraces that break up the facade in these increments, and then you have a dark brown slab edge that creates horizontal breakup of the facade, and then we have the metal of the terraces that create another horizontal element that further articulate the facade. This is the south elevation along Central. Here you see the glass facade continuing for the commercial use that wraps around the corner. The same rhythm and materials used on this facade. And then we have the residential entrance here. And then this is the red stone garden wall panel system that extends here to the rear of the property. And you can see some of the vines articulated on that panel system. And then this is those rear courtyards behind the building right there. This is the west facade. We're continuing that panel system around the west facade of the building at grade. And then here we have the access to the residential loading dock, the public parking. We've got a sign for the public parking here that will also indicate the availability of parking before people enter the enclosed parking garage, and the commercial parking garage entrance, the commercial loading dock entrance here. And again, you can see at the roof line, the trees planted to further shelter the penthouse from the residences to the west. And then finally, on the north end, again, as one of the commissioners on the Appearance Review Commission noted in the report that was made to you, we really focused on the consistency of the materials that wrap the entire structure. So we've continued this on the north facade of the building as well. At the first level, we have concrete, but above that, we've got the interior courtyard with the terraces on the interior, the terraces on the ends here. But this is a spandrel glass system that will mimic the glass system on all of the other three facades of the building. So we wanted to plan for the future development along the at the Imperial Motors site, but it was just critical to us to make sure that the residents of Wilmette, as they're viewing our development before anything is built there, don't have a blank wall, that they see something that has the same level of architectural attention as the balance of the building. Here we have the first rendering. This is a view northwest from Green Bay and Central Avenue. So here you can see the dark brown slab edge that wraps around the building. You can see the aluminum and glass window wall system, and here terraces that serve to break up the facade, each one of the facades wrapping the entire building. And again, here we introduced the horizontal metal elements of the terrace system. At grade, you get a sense of the activity and openness along Green Bay Road and Central Avenue for the commercial use, and kind of a vision of what we expect to be there as I zoom in. That you'll have indoor-outdoor dining space at that corner to really activate that corner. And then here you can also see the stone panel system along the southern facade. This is the view from the metro station. And again, this highlights what we were talking about a moment ago. This is the north facade with the spandrel glass. You can see towards the interior of the courtyard here. But really, what we've done is match the appearance on the north facade with the spandrel glass and the aluminum wrap to what you see on the balance of the facades. And again, what we like about about the terraces is it creates shadow and shading on the facade to really create some differentiation of what people will see as they look at the development. And then again here, you can see what happens to the roof line when there isn't when you have the uncovered terraces on the top floor of the building. This is the residential entrance on Central Avenue. Again, the stone panel system here and here. You can now see the landscaping growing up on the vines there, growing up on the panel system there. Some landscaping at the entrance. And here you can get a better appreciation. Whoop. I don't think that's going to let me do it. This gives you a little bit. This shows you a little bit better on the detail on the terrace there. One of the questions that came up in the Appearance Review Commission is, what do we do in the units in terms of window treatments? We have a consistent roller shade that is used in every one of the apartment homes. So we standardize what the exterior view will be. So there's only one element in window treatment that would be used throughout the entire building. Here you have a rendering basically from outside the Village Hall here. This is the 611 Residences of Wilmette building here. And this is our project in context here. Again, you can see the breakup of the facade all along and the detail of the design. We thought this would be interesting to highlight for you. Here we have the 611 building, and here we have our development. So when it was approved by the village board, the 611 building was approved with a 69-foot height to its roof. Our project is built at a 62-foot height. So even though we have 6 residential stories to the 5 residential stories of 611, we're getting those 6 residential stories in 62 feet of height. And then the parapet was approved at 70 feet and the mechanical screens were approved at 75 feet, whereas our project, we've provided, as Mr. Adler indicated, for a roof terrace that adds 1 foot to the depth for 63 feet. The top of the amenities, that enclosed space, the limited enclosed space I showed you on the roof, goes to 72 feet 8 inches, and then the top of the elevator overrun itself, which is about 205 square feet of space, is at 81 feet in height. We were very concerned about what the impact of our development would be on our neighbors, and so we performed a shadow study using a computer-generated model of the impact of our project. For context, this is the 611 Green Bay building here. This is our project here. The blue line represents what, I guess it shows up purple here. The purple line shows the shadow cast by our development as we're proposing it, and the red line shows what that shadow cast would be if the building was only 52 feet in height, since that's what the underlying zoning is. And as we walk through these slides, you'll see that there's virtually no differentiation, other than, I think, in one instance, between what a 52-foot building's impact is and what the impact is of the building we're proposing to you. And we wanted to highlight that for you. And without any standards in place for shadow studies here, we followed the standards that the City of Chicago uses for standards for shadow studies in terms of time of day and season for what we're showing you here. So this is the 7 a.m. at the spring equinox. And so here we do see that a 52-foot building or our building casts a shadow that extends over here. As we move to the 7 a.m. summer solstice, we already see that that pulls back. At the fall equinox at 7 a.m., there's a comparable relationship between what a 52-foot building and what our building would do. And here it's virtually identical in terms of what happens at the 7 a.m. winter solstice. But that's really it. As you go through and see 9 a.m. spring, 9 a.m. summer, 9 a.m. fall, 9 a.m. winter, the arc of the sun and the relationship of our building casts no shade, no shadow on the adjacent townhomes or multifamily uses there. And that further shows up as we move into the noon time dimension. And then 3 o'clock. And then 5 p.m. So we were very pleased to see the very limited impact that exists from our building generally and from what our buildings, what our request is for the height that we're seeking to put at this project. We also have some additional renderings to illustrate what some of the different perspectives from different view corridors would be for the building. So here you're seeing, looking east, you're seeing what the appearance of the building would be from Central Avenue and Park Avenue. So here you see the building, and again, here you see the tree line along the western facade at the roof that provides a screening. This is moving a little bit further north on Park Avenue. So we're in Park Avenue a little bit, and in the summer with the foliage, you really don't see the building at all from Park Avenue. Here's a winter condition, and you will have some visibility as to the top of the building here because you're losing the tree coverage, both at the homes on Park Avenue as well as at our roof line. This is a rendering showing the view of the building from looking west down Central Avenue from the intersection of Central and Wilmette. So here you can see the building, and you can just make out the enclosed amenity space on the roof there. But you get the sense of the shadow lines of the terraces as well as the horizontal breaking of the dark brown aluminum. Now I come to the landscape and illumination plan. Here again is the loading for the commercial. This is the parking access ramp and the loading for the residential. We've provided for landscape buffering along here and here. These are enclosed yards as well as a dog park, again with the stone fencing continuing here. Here we have that cutout that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation as a result of our conversation with the members of the Appearance Review Commission and the residents who are there. And then here you can see we've added an additional street lamp in this location. And here you can perceive the sod that we were asked to install that we're now seeking an exception to, so that we can actually create a grade system so this becomes walkable area for pedestrians. Here is our interior residential courtyard with our fountain. Doesn't want to cooperate, sorry. What's that? Thank you, Bill. And again, here along the entirety of this facade, we'll have vines planted to give some life to the garden wall that we described earlier. The staff had asked that we set back where we have trees from this corner, so we've eliminated a tree here and here. These are the two different planting conditions described, and here you can see that we currently have the 2-inch caliper provided for, that we'd like to go up to 4-inch caliper. And then this is the roof landscaping plan. Oh my God. There we go. Again, you're seeing the trees on the western facade, the landscape planting along the entire perimeter of the usable space, and the enclosed location there.
One question for you. Looking at this plan, what's rendered in green between where you have the landscape around the roof terrace and the edge of the parapet? What is that?
That's a roof membrane.
So it's not a green material?
It is, at this point, it is not programmed to be a green material.
Okay.
We're going, as we've indicated, one of the benefits we will be pursuing is certification under the multifamily new construction Green Globe certification. So we're at the beginning stages of that process. So to satisfy that requirement, it may end up being that there's a green roof component, but we're still working with our consultants as to what all of those components would be. But right now, we're not depicting it as
Right now, it's not considered to be a green roof.
Correct. And then Here are the exceptions that we're requesting, allowing for ground floor office use for the building management office, allowing for the 9 ground floor dwelling units, an increase in the maximum permitted building height from 52 feet and 4 stories to 62 feet and 6 stories for the main building, 63 feet and 6 stories for the roof terrace, 72.66 feet and 7 stories for the amenities penthouse. We're asking for an increase in the maximum permitted height of the elevator housing from 64 feet to 81 feet, and an increase in the maximum permitted height of roof-mounted mechanical equipment from 58 feet to 69.17 feet. We are asking for a waiver of the building massing design requirement illustrating a building bottom, middle, and top. We have the commercial as the clearly articulated bottom. We have the main residential component of the building as the middle. We've asked for this just out of an abundance of caution because we have the penthouse, which is a different element, but our view is because it's recessed, we didn't know whether or not you would consider that to be an articulation. Allow for variance of roof lines at intervals in excess of 25 linear feet of building length. As I mentioned, we have a differentiation of the roof line, but in some instances that's occurring at greater than 25-foot intervals. We've talked about the decrease in the minimum ground floor height from 14 feet to 13 feet. Decrease in the minimum number of required pedestrian access paths from 2 to 1 because we've got the enclosed public parking and we've got the elevator serving that access path, and then the balance of the property has the Central Avenue sidewalk and the Green Bay Road sidewalk. Increase the maximum permitted ground floor residential common space from 600 square feet to 4,415 square feet, which is to take into account the amenity space that we've provided for, and then increase the maximum permitted solid fence height from 6.5 feet to 7.5 feet. That's the red stone garden wall that we've been talking about. Decrease the front yard building setback above the ground floor from 5 feet to 0 feet. So we've got the Green Bay setback at grade of 5 feet, but we've got that overhang of the building above the ground floor, pulling it to the property line to create the covered space at grade. And then what we talked about as a result of the Appearance Review Commission meeting last night, increasing the permitted setback along Central Avenue to 1/2 foot, pulling the building back so we can provide for more robust landscaping to treat that garden wall. And then we've asked for the use of reflective tinted or colored glass for non-retail use. The Village Center design standards call for a clear glass. We think that that ties back to commercial use at grade more than anything, and so we're asking for the ability to use our colored glass for the non-retail use. We wouldn't treat the glass for the commercial use. We absolutely love the transparency that's created there. The public benefits that we are providing as part of this development is, as I mentioned, the Green Globe's multifamily new construction sustainability design certification. We would make a $1.6 million donation to advance affordable housing opportunities in the village of Wilmette. We're very excited to have Rob Anthony here, who will be speaking to you in a little bit about what Community Partners for Affordable Housing is going to be able to do with the $1.6 million donation to create 14 affordable housing units in the village of Wilmette. So we're very excited about that opportunity. The development that we've created also improves the stormwater management from its current condition with the International Bank of Chicago site. And then, as Mr. Adler referenced, we believe we're advancing a number of goals and policies of the comprehensive plan and village center master plan, encouraging retail facilities serving residents' needs, providing housing options that are alternative to and complementary of the single-family character of the village, encouraging redevelopment of underutilized commercial property, provide and maintain an attractive appearance along public ways, build upon the existing commercial and dwelling unit bases of the Village Center District, providing high-density, transit-oriented, multifamily residential opportunities and streetscape improvements, and promoting reinvestment in the Village Center District, and finally, promoting redevelopment of vacant or underutilized and inefficient properties with taller building structures. And that is the conclusion of the presentation that we have about the development itself. But with your permission, we'd like to invite Mr. Anthony to speak about the public housing benefit that will be created through the collaboration with community partners for affordable housing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening. My name is Rob Anthony. I'm the president of Community Partners for Affordable Housing. Let me make sure so Community Partners for Affordable Housing is a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to develop affordable housing and provide services that empower individuals and families to secure and retain quality housing. Our vision is thriving communities, diverse housing, and successful residents. What we mean by diverse housing is that we partner with communities in a variety of ways to help them offer a full range of housing options in their communities so that people of all income levels have a place to call home in their communities. And we also work to ensure there's a diverse range of housing sizes and styles and types to offer housing for people at different circumstances in their life. We are a HUD-certified housing counseling agency, and we're also a certified community housing development organization. We provide a whole range of housing services throughout Lake County and northern Cook County. We provide HUD-certified housing counseling and education, so in addition to getting people into housing, we prepare people for sustainable and responsible home ownership. We have down payment assistance programs that we offer, financial coaching that we offer, a variety of home repair and accessibility improvements. Depending on where you live, you can get up to $40,000 in grants to make accessibility improvements and repair homes. We have foreclosure prevention services, rental assistance, community land trust administration, which we'll talk about a little bit more, inclusionary housing administration. We partner with the cities of Evanston, Highland Park, and Lake Forest to administer their inclusionary housing programs. We provide new construction of affordable housings. We also do a lot of acquisition, rehabilitation, and then resale or lease in a variety of different communities. We have rental housing ourselves. We do our own property management, and we do construction management. These are some photos just to give you an idea of the type of housing that we provide. So on the top left, that is a new construction development, a 14-unit townhome development that we did in Highland Park. It was actually the first LEED Gold certified affordable housing development in the region, and it serves a range of income levels from people at 60% of median income all the way up to 120% of median income. It's also a mixture of rental and for sale. Some of those other scattered site homes that you see are a mixture of ownership and rental units that we use in our community land trust model, and some of the residents there that we serve. We serve in every community that we work with, we have a preference for people who live or work in the community. So we would propose to do that here in Wilmette. So we're providing providing housing for people right here in the community. In terms of the community impact that we've had, we've helped over 5,800 households prepare for successful ownership. We provided down payment assistance to over 2,400 households, getting them into their first homes. We provided foreclosure counseling to over 2,000 residents. About half of those have been able to get some kind of modification to keep their home. We've acquired and rehabbed over 140 distressed properties that we've put back into the useful housing stock and provided affordable housing for low to moderate income households. We've provided home rehab services and grants for over 260 households. We have over 95 units that we've created through rental housing that we manage ourselves. And then we have helped create or preserve an additional over 1,300 units of affordable housing through joint venture partnerships with for-profit developers. So what we are proposing, Optima came to us and they asked us to help them develop a plan to provide for affordable housing in Wilmette. And our immediate reaction was, let's see how we can leverage any funds that Optima is willing to donate so that we can provide the most number of units to the most number of people in Wilmette. And so we've looked at a couple of different options, and what we're proposing, I think, is a really exciting model to leverage Optima's donation, but also to help launch a new foundation here in Wilmette, the Morganti Wilson Foundation. Alyssa and Fred Morganti and Wilson are here. They own the Morganti Wilson Architect firm. Fred is a board member of Community Partners for Affordable Housing. They have been strong advocates for affordable housing. They live here in Wilmette. And we've been working with them over the past year or so to launch a foundation based on past fundraising efforts that we've done with them. We believe that they can bring in about $75,000 per year to the Foundation for Affordable Housing here in Wilmette. So what we would propose to do, as Fred mentioned, Optima was proposing a donation of $1.6 million. And we propose that that donation is made to SEPA either directly through SEPA or through the village and then to SEPA. And what we can then do is apply for the Illinois Affordable Housing Tax Credits, and that is a state-run program that provides a 50-cent tax credit for every dollar donated to a nonprofit that's performing affordable housing work. So that $1.6 million can generate a tax credit, a state tax credit of $800,000. We can then sell that tax credit. The rate for that is usually about 87 cents on the dollar or so. So that could bring in another $696,000 of revenue that we can use for affordable housing here in Wilmette. As I mentioned, the Morganti Wilson Foundation is proposing $75,000 per year over a 4-year period. That would be $300,000. And then we've had conversations with the Cook County Planning Departments, who administers the federal home and CDBG funds. And early conversations have shown that they would be interested in helping to support this work here in Wilmette, too. We're estimating about $315,000, which is about $35,000 for 9 of the units that we're proposing. Now, the state donation tax credit program, that is an application that we would have to submit. That's not a guarantee. That being said, we've used that program many, many times, and we've received that every time that we've applied. So it's very likely that we could get that, but it is an application process that we would have to apply to. The same with the Cook County Home and CDBG Fund. We would have to apply for that. What we would propose to do with that money, so that would generate about $2.9 million in total. So again, leveraging that $1.6 million to $2.9. And what we believe we can do with that is to create 14 affordable units throughout Wilmette. And we are proposing 4 rental units for households earning no more than 60% of median income, and then 5 ownership units using the community land trust model for households earning no more than 80% of median income, and then 5 ownership units for households earning no more than 120% of area median income. And again, all these units would be in a community land trust. And so we operate the first community land trust program in Illinois. We operate the land trust program for Evanston, Highland Park, and Lake Forest. And the way the community land trust model works is that we will build housing or we will acquire and rehab housing, and then we will sell it to an income-qualified buyer. But the buyer is buying the improvements only. The nonprofit entity retains ownership of that underlying land. And so essentially what it does is it takes that land value out of the equation, and that stays with the nonprofit entity. and there are resale restrictions on the property. So when someone decides they want to sell their home, there's a resale formula that dictates how much they can sell the home back for, and they have to sell it to another low to moderate income household or back to the nonprofit so that we can resell it to another low to moderate income household. And so what it does is it creates this permanent infrastructure of affordable housing in the community. So it's not a one-time, one unit that's going to assist one family. It's reused over and over again. It will stay permanently affordable. I'll get into the ground lease a little bit more in a little more detail in a little bit. But what this proposal would do, again, is to create 14 units over a 4-year period. We would, again, give a preference to people who live or work in Wilmette. And it would really be an exciting opportunity to leverage these donations to launch this foundation and to really start more affordable housing work here in Wilmette. The typical residents that we serve, they tend to be nonprofit staff, municipal employees, retail staff, wait staff, school employees, healthcare employees, younger people who grew up in the community and want to return to the community but can't afford to do that, seniors who may have been in the community for a long time but can't afford to stay here in the community, persons who've experienced death in the family or divorce and they want to stay in the community. These are all very typical types of stories that we see. The next slide has the income limits. Just to give you an idea, when we talk about 60% and 80% and 120%, the 4 rental units that we talked about at 60% of median income, those are HUD-defined income limits that are based on household size. So for a 4-person household, the income limit is $53,460 for the rental units at 60% of median income. And for the lower-priced ownership units, the income limit would be $71,300 for a 4-person household. And at 120% median income, the income limit would be about $98,000 for a 4-person household. This is the sample resale formula. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but what the resale formula essentially does is it compresses any kind of gain or loss. And so if there's appreciation on the home, the homeowner is able to get the equity that they build in the home when they decide to resell, and they can get some appreciation, but that appreciation is capped so that it stays affordable to the next buyer. And that happens every time there's a resale. So every time there's a sale, there's a new 99-year renewable ground lease on the property, so it always stays affordable for buyer after buyer. So it's a great way for lower income households to build some equity, perhaps get some appreciation, but still make sure that the large investment that we have to put into affordable housing stays with the community and is used over and over again. As I mentioned, we do a lot of work in Evanston, Highland Park, and Lake Forest. We've used models similar to this to leverage about $12 billion in outside resources for other communities. So typically our model is that those 3 communities at least have some inclusionary housing funds that they use to contribute, and then we take those funds and leverage those with additional dollars, like we're doing here. Here, in this example, the village itself doesn't have an inclusionary housing fund, and so what we would do is, instead of the municipal dollars, we would use the Optima donation to leverage those additional dollars.
So today, today, have you developed any properties in the village?
We have not developed any in Wilmette, no. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Mr. Chairman, we have some other of our consultants here. We have the traffic and parking consultant, we have our civil engineer, and we have SVN Commercial, the retail broker. Would you like them to speak, or they can be available for questions?
I think it would be beneficial if the both the traffic and the parking consultants could briefly summarize their studies.
Okay. That'll be Lue Abuna. So this is you. Okay, that's good.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. My name is Louis Abuna. I'm a principal with KLOA, located in Rosemont, Illinois. My firm conducted the traffic and parking study for the proposed development. I'll be very brief with my presentation. The traffic study detailed, the report that we did detailed the analysis that we completed. As part of the study, we analyzed a number of intersections in the immediate vicinity of the site. We looked at the Green Bay corridor, the intersections with Central Avenue, Washington Avenue, and Lake Street. We also looked at the intersections of Park with Washington and Central, as well as the alleys intersections with Central and Washington. So we tried to look at the impact comprehensively. We looked at the weekday morning, weekday evening, and Saturday midday peak periods, analyzed these intersections to understand their current operations, how they interact with other uses in the area, with the proximity to the railroad crossing. And generally, these intersections do operate efficiently with acceptable level of service. There are some areas of delay and congestion, particularly as it relates to train events. When the gates are down, traffic on Central and Lake tend to back up until the trains clear. And when the gates are up, the traffic goes back to normal condition within 1 or 2 cycles. The development being located in downtown Wilmette and in close proximity to the public transportation and to the businesses downtown qualifies it as a transit-oriented development. As a result, we expect the trips will be reduced with residents opting to use a train to travel to and from work, or maybe work in Wilmette and therefore don't need to drive. So obviously that would lower the impact of the proposed development. The development of the site will eliminate curb cuts on both Green Bay and Central. Currently there are a total of 3 curb cuts. All of those will be eliminated, which will be very positive from the standpoint of impact on vehicular traffic and as well as pedestrian traffic. All the access will be limited to the alley, which again help reduce the impact and help distribute the traffic both in northerly direction to Washington and south to Central. Basically, I'll just go over the conclusions that we had in the traffic study. Like I said earlier, the development is considered a transit-oriented development, and therefore will have reduced traffic due to the availability of alternative modes of transportation and accessibility of goods and services within the without requiring the use of the automobile. The development traffic will have a low impact on the surrounding roadway traffic and pedestrian operations. The development access of the north-south alley will eliminate the existing curb cuts on Central and Green Bay Road, therefore reducing the pedestrian conflicts. We've recommended that pedestrian improvements be implemented at the intersection of Green Bay and Central, which include the restriping of the crosswalk and the installation of countdown timers. And the parking supply, as Mark has indicated, meets the Village of Wilmette requirements for both the residential and the commercial components of the development. That's a brief presentation of my full report. The study was submitted to the village. Your staff and consultant has reviewed it, and they've generally concurred with our conclusions. And with that, I thank you.
At what time of year was the traffic study done?
So we did 2 sets of counts. Initial counts we did in June, and then we went back and conducted additional counts in October when the school was in session.
Okay.
What we
'Cause I know
found...
that was one of the questions that had been raised by one of the residents as far as the traffic study being done in June, and wanted to know what impact the school traffic might have on the study.
We understand that. We had to do it in June because at the time the study was needed, but we went back and did additional counts in October to address the issue of the school and its impact. Central does become one-way west of Park when the school is in session. What we found, though, is that in the comparison of the traffic in the afternoon versus the evening peak hour, even though there is a surge of traffic from the school. The evening peak hour, which occurs after the school is out, it's between 5 and 6 p.m., that traffic is about 30% lower. So while there is a surge in traffic from the school, the traffic in the area is much higher in the evening, and that's where we focused our analysis on the weekday PM peak hour.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our formal presentation. If you'd like, we can address some of the concerns that residents have raised in communication with the village, or if you want to, up to this point, or if you want to wait until there's further public comment.
What I think I'd like to do is I'd like to open it up to public comment, and then, after we've heard some of the comments, then give you the floor again to respond to those.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. So we'll, now open up to public comment. What I would ask is that, you try to limit your comments to about 3 minutes. If somebody has made a comment before that is similar to the one that you want to make, we would prefer not to have people repeating the same thing over and over again. If you have a group that is sort of represented together, and there's a spokesman that represents, a larger constituent, that's great too. So anybody who is interested in speaking either for or against, we will now entertain public comment. And if you would, please state your name and address.
I shall. My name is Joel Sugar. I live at 1230 Central Avenue, which is right behind that structure in the Wilmette Village Commons. While I'm an officer of the Wilmette Village Commons HOA, my comments are my own and are not intended to represent those of the HOA. I've been a Wilmette resident for the past 36 years and have lived at my present address for the past 2 years. My home and the rest of the units at Wilmette Village Commons are the residences most impacted by the planned development at 1210 Central. The proposed development site at the present time is underutilized, poorly landscaped, and poorly maintained, and the optimal plan has some appeal. There are, however, some concerns that would enhance this appeal. The building height and its shading of my unit, despite how it was presented, is concerning, and a shorter building would be much more attractive to us. If the present proposed height is maintained, the placement of 5 large trees on the west end of the rooftop terrace would appear to increase the shading of our property, and this should be reconsidered. More important, the alleyway behind our property will be the primary vehicular access to the proposed development for residential occupants, commercial customers, and deliveries. This causes me to be confused by the assessment by KLOA that, quote, and I am quoting, based on review of the traffic counts, the alley carries a limited amount of traffic. Given the limited amount of traffic that the proposed development will generate, the alley will be adequate in accommodating existing and future traffic volumes, unquote. With 108 residential units and commercial units and 200 parking spaces for both, it is hard to believe that there will not be substantial alley usage and congestion, which will significantly impact noise for our Wilmette Village Commons and will likely impact vehicular egress from the north end of our property. Also, with a restaurant being proposed there will be traffic in the evening if the restaurant's open in the evening, in the morning if the restaurant's open in the morning, and presumably deliveries earlier and later. Likewise, commercial delivery vehicles for the 1210 Central and their loading, unloading will impact our property negatively. At the very least, it is expected that the village or the developer will upgrade the alleyway surface to handle the increase, and the trucks will not be allowed to load, unload, idle, or back out because of the beeping noises during inappropriate hours, that is, early in the morning and late in the evening. Additionally, during the building process, it will be essential that work and work vehicular traffic be limited to appropriate hours, and that this be monitored and enforced by the village. I appreciate the opportunity to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Sherry Medwin, 848 Park Avenue. And first, I would love to commend the Optima developers for considering the importance of affordable housing in Wilmette. Indeed, the village ordinances recognize and address the shortage of decent, safe, and reasonably affordable housing in the village. And the village's affordable housing plan, adopted 2004, recognizes that affordable housing enables persons with moderate income to enjoy the benefits of living in our community, and our residents to enjoy the benefits of a community with economic diversity. So thank you for considering that and partnering with community partners for affordable housing. What I'd like to know, though, is why 14 affordable units were not included in this development, why they are being passed on to an affordable housing developer. It would be really nice to have affordable units in town as opposed to out on the outskirts of town. Most of the units right now are scattered west Wilmette or very east Wilmette, close to the L. And if you take a quick look at Zillow or Redfin or any of those services, you'll see very few affordable units available anywhere in Wilmette, and none of them in town. So I do hope you'll take that into consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Julie.
Hello, I'm Julie Wolf, 1202 Lake. I also wanted to commend Optima for, I think, a very nice-looking development, transit-oriented, and I'm very impressed with what they're planning to do with community partners for affordable housing. I've been familiar with them for a while. I think it would be a real plus to the community, so I think that's excellent. I've been asked to convey some concerns from Go Green Wilmette about bird friendliness. Again, it's great that it's going to be Green Globe certified, which I think is an excellent green certification, good benefit to the community. Some concerns about bird safety during migration and that sort of thing. I don't know if all of you heard the news from the Audubon Society that bird populations have greatly decreased and we're in a major migratory area. I actually researched this a little bit. There's a group called the American Bird Conservancy, and they work with the American Institute of Architects. And there's actually an article that was in Architectural Record, I don't have the date, October, a couple years ago, but it talks about some things that can be done. One thing that seems to work really well is a frit applied to the glass. There is a dimension 2 inches wide, 4 inches high. If there's a frit with those dimensions, the birds stay away from it. There also are ultraviolet coatings that can be applied because birds see those and humans do not. There apparently is a glass company, Viricon, based in Minneapolis, that supplies various options of glass that would do this. So just wanted to mention that for consideration. I think that would add considerably to the green considerations on this building. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
My name is Dan Marguerite. I live at 1609 Walnut. I'm here kind of as a business owner, though, also from 535 Green Bay Road. Somewhat selfishly, I guess, because I like what has happened to this town in the last 8 to 10 years. Having my business here and seeing our downtown develop, I am looking forward to something like this to have more consumers for a lot of our downtown businesses, because I know how hard it is to keep our retail and our restaurants and our downtown thriving. and I think this can really add to our downtown. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
My name is Mike Myers. I live at 2634 Laurel Lane. My main argument, I suppose, to be here is that aesthetically, I find the building to be very unattractive based on village standards. I find our town to be quaint, and this just seems like something that would be placed in the middle of the West Loop or in Evanston. I just think that it should be taken into consideration based on the other new apartment building just built down the street, which I also find to be aesthetically unappealing. I know that they're doing development over on Wilmette Avenue and Ridge for a new senior facility, which I hope won't be unappealing. I know kitty corner to that. There's another situation going on. I just hope that there's a central planning and there's someone taking into consideration aesthetics. They have two other projects, Optima does, at Central Street from the 90s and on Sheridan Road, which I also find to be unattractive. And so there's a theme here, and I just think that it should be taken into consideration that if there's a central planning committee, something that is more in touch with what Wilmette is should be considered. And in terms of the low-income housing, I think that they should try to give in more money if they get everything that they want.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the comment, there is a, the village does have an appearance review commission, which reviews all commercial properties that are coming up for redevelopment. And there is no quote-unquote aesthetic standard that has been established for the building or for buildings. Each property is taken on the case-by-case basis for, the value of the proposal. There's within the Appearance Review Commission, and being a former commission member, there is a wide difference of opinion as far as what's aesthetically pleasing. So, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder sometimes. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Iwona Boczęska, 1234 Central Avenue. So our
I'm sorry, your name
Iwona
again?
Boczęska.
Okay.
Boczęska. Very
Excuse
simple.
me, you did get a letter at your places.
Yes. So I stated my concerns in that letter. So number one, I would like to say a thank you, Mr. Siegel, for very insightful presentation. And also, I have to admit, you are creating a heaven for your residents. So I'm considering becoming a renter of your penthouse. That's the heaven. But on the other hand, Mr. Siegel, you are creating a hell for me being just behind a loading dock and your garbage unit, because my townhouse and my backyard is right there. So the question is, how do I approach this development? On one hand, as a taxpayer, I welcome something new, something interesting apart from the aesthetics. But on the other hand, being a taxpayer and spending at $750,000 on my unit, I'm quite concerned because if I want to sell it in the future, what do I have to offer? I have a lovely view of two loading docks, unless I'm going to invite you for a cup of coffee and we can have a conversation how we resolve that issue. So my question is, currently we have two entrances from Central Avenue. Why don't we just build a fence from the alley and you just enter your development from Central, from that corner? Because anyway, when people gonna be leaving or entering this very narrow alley, they have to go somewhere. So anyway, they're gonna make right turn, left turn into Central, because otherwise, that's the way to nowhere. This is just an alley. And a colleague of mine just mentioned noise, which is a real concern. I'm going to add to that pollution, because majority of those cars that's going to come will be diesel-operated service vehicles. People going to move in and out, in and out. This is a rental property, so people sign a lease for 12 months, and then probably they're going to move sooner or later. So that's what we're going to see. Garbage trucks, a lot of cars entering and leaving. And also, this is residential, not only residential, but also commercial parking. So Mr. Siegel kindly said that he would like to bring 24-hour activity to Wilmette. Mr. Siegel, I moved to Wilmette not to have 24-hour activity. I just moved to Wilmette to come home from my downtown job for the government and just relax, just relax. That's the Wilmette. That's our lifestyle. And my daughter, who's a doctor, moved to Wilmette, back to Wilmette. We have strong connection to the community. So 24-hour entertainment was really good concept to me, but ladies and gentlemen, 40 years ago, now I want to just come home and enjoy my community, be safe, make sure that people are safe. And I don't want to sit there, have sleepless nights, unless you're going to visit for coffee, and count the cars entering and leaving this alley. What kind of, I made a really bad move by buying my townhouse, because that's what I'm going to end up with. Sleepless nights, maybe writing letters to Mr. Chairman, expressing my frustration. No, I don't want to do that. I want to be happy with my community. I want to be happy with new development. I want to enjoy whatever Mr. Siegel can offer me and his company. So, why don't we reconsider how you're going to enter your development? Just keep all your activity behind the wall. Put the fence, put some trees, keeps us happy as residents, and do whatever you have to do it behind the fence. And again, I'm impressed with whatever you're offering your future clients. Maybe I'm going to be one of them if you buy my property. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Adler.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Joe Lunkus. I live at 811 Park Avenue. I've been a Wilmette resident and a resident at 811 for 35 years. I'm standing before you to object to the magnitude of this project. We went through, years back, as you know, a village planning process and came up with the guidelines for a planned unit development. Those guidelines were breached when the One Wilmette project was built, and I won't go through all the details. But now another developer stands before us looking for significant variances to the guidelines that were developed in our planned unit development. They're looking for a 50% variance in the number of floors. They're looking for a 40% variance in the height. They're looking for variances on the setback and public access along the sidewalks. What concerns me is this is the domino effect. We consider this one. What are we going to do when the developer shows up with a plan in hand for the Jaguar dealership? What are we going to do when a developer stands up with a plan in hand for the northeast corner of Wilmette Avenue and Green Bay Road? What are we going to do when a developer stands in hand with a plan for the mini mart and the service center right next to it, or the Wilmette Auto Care? Are we all going to be granting variances to all of these developers so that we end up with a monolithic streetscape from Isabella all the way up to Lake Street? I'm just very concerned about the direction of the community in what we're building our village into. When I see we're building it into a more urban city, and that's not why I moved to Wilmette. So it's a tough decision. I know the tax dollars are attractive to the village, but I don't think we need to, and we do want to have some density in the village, but I don't think we need to go and achieve all this on one large property, continue the precedent of looking at our planned unit development guidelines and throwing them aside, and going on and having to deal with this when the next developer comes. And their argument will be, well, you did it for the first, you did it for the second, why not for me? It's adding a lot of congestion down these alleys to it. The second point I'd like to make is I think affordable housing is commendable, and I see no reason why this developer should not be required to incorporate it into their facility. Before I moved to Wilmette, I lived down in Lincoln Park in a place called Walpole Point. I own a townhouse there, and a third was owner-occupied, a third was market rent, and a third was subsidized housing. And we got along swimmingly, all of the residents there. I don't know why they're donating money to the charity. It sounds great, but I think these people should be at the transportation hub and near all the services, be able to walk to the Jewel. If you're on a limited income, it's tough to afford transportation. So that's my second comment on it. And with that, I want to thank you for hearing me out.
Good. Thank you, sir. Other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name's Nancy Hoying. I live at 901 Forest Avenue, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Wilmette. We believe our core mission is to support voter rights and voter education, but we have an advocacy division that supports fair and affordable housing. We are heartened and encouraged that affordable housing was considered and proposed as part of this application. This is a standard we should expect from all new development in Wilmette, and we thank you and the village staff. We are pleased that the developer Optima is partnering with a strong and reputable organization, Community Partners for Affordable Housing, and that the proposal includes a community land trust, a model that ensures long-term sustainability and can be used as a tool for future affordable housing strategies in Wilmette. The Village of Wilmette's existing affordable housing plan sets a goal of 15% of the units in new multifamily unit developments to be affordable. To comply with this commitment and demonstrate Wilmette's intent to meet the objective in the plan, we ask that Optima increase their contribution to a level needed to provide 16 units, not the 14 units illustrated in the current proposal. Additionally, 1210 Central is a location well suited for on-site affordable housing units given the close proximity to employment, transportation, and retail. We support the plan for scattered site housing that integrates affordable housing units, but we also believe strongly in inclusionary housing in new developments, echoing what others have said tonight, and would like to see some of the requested affordable units on site at 1210 Central. We concur with the community and village leaders with the last mixed-use residential commercial development at 611 Green Bay Road that we missed an opportunity for the developer to provide on-site or inclusionary affordable housing units. We know you have a lot to consider tonight and a lot of them very important community issues, but we ask the village to consider in the future appropriate mechanisms to ensure affordable housing units created with Optima and SEPA exist in perpetuity and with guarantees so it continues on in the Village of Wilmette. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Renee Lanham. I'm at 1425 Maple Avenue here in Wilmette. I also serve as president of a nonprofit that provides housing out of Evanston, and I'm constantly being given grief for why Wilmette is not stepping up to help out with the affordable housing situation. Last I checked, it was about 4.5% was affordable housing. I think the target from Cook County is over 11%, which means we need to look to double it here. This is a tremendous opportunity for Wilmette to make a dent in its shortage. This is a huge project. If this was in Chicago, and I think it's not in Chicago because it's getting more expensive to build it there, 10 to 20% of these units would be required to be affordable housing. 10 to 20%, okay? Maybe there's a reason Optima is moving up the North Shore because they're not having those requirements, but we all need to address this affordable housing. This is a huge opportunity to do it. You could go up to the 20%. It should be both on-site. I don't know anything about the organization we've heard from tonight, but it sounds like they're doing some great stuff. But maybe we got to get 10 units in there and 10 units off-site or something, but it needs to be bigger. $1.6 million on a project this size? That is ridiculous. I mean, really. that's kind of embarrassing at some level. So I'm hoping that we hold them, it's a nice first ask, but that's what they asked. I hope we go back and ask for more. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Reiner. I'm 1225 Washington Avenue. Although I welcome the idea of adding more interest to our village, I'm here to object the magnitude of the Optima project. As a mother of 2 young children who are officially at roaming age, I'm frightened by the prospect to the increased alley traffic. I can't imagine how the traffic studies came out so favorable to this project when sorry. When as a mother, I currently hold my breath when my children ask to walk from my house to Starbucks, which involves crossing that alley, which is basically a thoroughfare between Central and Lake, and everyone here knows that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is David Furster. I live at 1621 Elmwood. I lived in Evanston for 20 years before I came here. I've been here for 15 years. I watched my commute time within Evanston increase threefold while Optima was developing all its properties in Evanston. Evanston has become, to me, an urban tangle and an unpleasant place to be. And I would hate to see this kind of out-of-scale project with very small setbacks and very high profile start to take over what is, I think, a very hospitable environment in Wilmette now. And I think it would drastically start, these kinds of developments will drastically start to change the character of the village. And I don't think I would prefer that not to happen. I was also struck by the rhetoric from the traffic analyst that there will be reduced impact. Yes, it will be reduced relative to no impact, to impact if it weren't planned properly, but adding 200 cars to an already congested thoroughfare of Green Bay and Lake Avenue, I think will, again, it's going to make Wilmette into a much less hospitable place to live. And so I'm very against the scale of this project in all dimensions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your service and for the excellent presentations. My name is Barbara Bischoff-Kleeman. I live at 1223 Washington. I hate speaking before these groups, so be patient. People have made the relevant comments. It's about precedent, it's about scale. One of the criteria here is that for this block, which is half residential as opposed to the library block, that it not impact property values. It will impact property values. I've had enough conversations, but common sense will tell you this impacts property values for all of us that will adjoin this site. I love this. I wish we could put it in Eden's Plaza where Carson says. But it's like picking up the Malincrot building and dropping it onto the block. It just is overwhelming. So thank you very much for your consideration. The plan is well written the way it is, and again, we have a long way to go on this. So baby stepping it and being wise and conservative is what will protect the neighbors and the values in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Richard Egan. I live at 1236 Central in the infamous townhouses that are most affected by this. And I've been a resident of Wilmette for over 50 years, probably longer than some of you have even been around, period. My only comment here is that as I looked at the master plan, you had a section in it that talked about this particular block, the Imperial Motors block. And originally, you were proposing a 4-story building on the site of the Jaguar dealership, and maintaining this site as a 2-story building. And now we've got a totally different situation. So what I'd ask is that you please consider that you've done enough development here. We don't need a 4-story building now in the Jaguar building site. And you're talking maybe about doing some more development on the north end where that current multi-story building is. So please think about that. The traffic, we've all talked about in the alley, and if you add another major building there, it's going to really be a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. My name's Sharon Block. I live at 1240 Central Avenue in one of the townhouses behind the property. I think people have raised some really good points tonight, and I, as somebody who grew up in West Wilmette and was able to move back as an adult just barely, I'm really happy to be a part of the community again, enjoy the area we have. I think my sister and I are probably some of the few people in the neighborhood who do actually use the public transportation, and we don't drive a car everywhere. We do walk to Jewel. But the traffic study that suggests that all of the people living in this building would do that and not, increase vehicle traffic is just not feasible. We just know what happens around here. One of my other concerns is really about the presentation itself, and that a lot of the comparisons about the height and the size of the building are comparing this to the 611 property, but there are no houses right near that. There's just other commercial areas behind that in the library. So saying that our building isn't as high as that building doesn't really matter, because it is going to have a huge impact on us. The noise, the shadow, our property values, because everybody on that alley has a 2-story window that gets daylight. That was the main selling point, other than the walkability of the neighborhood and the quiet. So we're going to lose all of these things if we have something that size put in. The other thing that was mentioned in some of this proposal was valet parking. Where are they parking the additional valet cars? Is that in the 22 spaces that are already set aside? I don't see how that's really practical, but that also acknowledges the fact that people aren't just going to use transit to get here, and it really is going to be problematic for those of us who are already here, those of us who already do walk by and through that alley and see the danger both on Central Avenue and at Washington. Driving through that alley is dangerous. Also, the traffic study was done in October and June. There was no snow. That alley becomes impassable when there is snow. I think there's a lot of things that weren't really considered in some of the information that we have here. Again, I do appreciate, again, the Optima's commitment to affordable housing, but agree with everybody else that it should be in that building if we're going to bother doing it. Make it available to the people in here. Honestly, even if it was the most beautiful building in the world, I don't care that the rental tenants have the most luxurious fixtures. That does not help me as a resident of the area. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I don't care that it's granite or quartz. Yeah, this has been really, really upsetting to us. Regardless of what goes here, we're going to have 2 years of construction and a lot of pain just for this building and then the Jaguar dealership. And again, I want the town to remain vibrant, and I want the tax revenue. We get that. That's important. I do actually shop locally and wander around spending extra money to buy my pet food locally, things like that. I care. but this is just too much. And again, I'm on the not aesthetically pleasing side. I'm still chatting. Anyway, I think I covered at least some of my questions, and I'm really hoping that this goes to another community meeting and more people get a chance to see the presentation. It's really hard to view some of the slides and some of the renderings, and I think those are really helpful for everybody in Wilmette to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, ma'am.
I wasn't going to speak. Hi, my name is Vicki O'Donnell. I'm at 714 Prairie Avenue. Hi, John. I know John Adler. I don't think I'm going to be the most popular person here. And like I said, I wasn't going to speak. But I have some things to say. I lived in Evanston for 30 years. I was on the board of chamber in the Evanston, and I remember the first high-rise being built and all the people putting petition signs saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't change Evanston. Well, Evanston changed big time, and it's still changing. My favorite pubs are gone. And I love it there, though. I go and I enjoy it. But I moved because it wasn't for me anymore, so I left. But it's a booming town, and things change, and people don't like change. I like this. I like this building. I can walk there. This used to be my bank. What I don't like my printer's building being demolished, and there's a fence around it, and it's been like that for a couple of years. I don't like your beautiful townhouses. When I first moved to Wilmette, they were half-built and vacant for 2 years. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And the builder went bankrupt, and the snow was, and then somebody finally came to the rescue and built them, and they are beautiful. But I'll tell you something, your property, they're not going to devalue. And I'll tell you why. I had a house behind the Jewel on Green Bay, and John Adler knows me very well. And the manager of the Jewel knows me very well. I spend a whole year of my life every month in this building in front of all the boards. And I was the only one because I didn't want that Jewel there. I thought my house property value would go down. Literally, I took pictures and brought them to all the board members. I invited them to my house to have coffee. And you could see semi-trucks from my backyard. And they idled, too. They weren't listening to the codes because it was brand new. So they would pull up and idle, and the flapping of the truck, bing, 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 and I had my grandkids, and they'd scream and wake up when I babysat them and cry. It was really not fun for a long time, for 2 years. And I thought my house value's going to go down and everything, right? The Jewel went up. There's nothing I could do about it, but I kept coming here. And this village is a wonderful place, by the way, and Jewel helped. You know what we did? We built a brick fence. That brick fence, by the way, the manager of Jewel told me they should put my name on it. I had a different last name at the time. I was married and we got divorced. But anyway, because I persisted and said it was noisy, we had to do something. And the village helped me. We put the brick wall and we put all the arborvitae. By the way, those arborvitae are that was 18 years ago. And it worked. And by the way, I sold my house at a very nice profit. So I'm just telling you, it's fearful. Change is scary. And when I lived in Evanston, the same thing. And I lived behind the Jewel, and I still have the pictures of the eyesore of those trucks from my beautiful backyard and how it all changed. And before that, by the way, there were oil change for cars. That that was nasty. Green Bay, that's what you have to deal with. You have to remember, there's change. Now this is nice. Now, there's some things, I just seeing this for the first time, there's some things that maybe we have to change. But I like the idea of restaurants. I can walk, I'm an old lady. This is going to increase the value of my home. I don't like vacancies. I don't like that printer shop. But why is it vacant? The printer guy is a friend of mine, told me some stories. I don't know what's true or false anymore. I don't like my Carson's gone. Why can't we get a Kohl's, a Target? Why can't we do something? I feel like volunteering and helping recruit, it's an eyesore. I don't understand. I get retail is down, but I like progress, and I understand change is a scary thing. But I can tell you, Wilmette properties are not going to go down. You live walking distance to a train. You live walking distance to Lake Michigan. Okay, your property values will not go down because of this. I had semi-trucks, and they didn't go down. No, I have semi-trucks, and it didn't go down. I made a profit. So you don't have to worry about that, is what I'm saying. Don't be afraid. So I just want to hear more. I think the height is not like Evanston. It's not a high-rise. It's just 5 stories, for God. I'm for it, is what I'm saying.
If we can wrap up the comments
Yeah.
here.
Let's keep it going and do some more. I love Optima. Let's keep it going. So, like I said, I'm probably not popular, but I like it. Let's go, John.
Thank you. Yes, sir, in back.
Good evening. My name is David O'Donohue, and I live at 2419 Thornwood. One issue that has not been presented tonight is this issue of tax increment financing. Our neighbors up the street on Green Bay Road, I believe, instituted this TIF district along the Green Bay corridor to encourage something like this. And here we are in the village of Wilmette. We're very lucky to have Optima here, willing to spend a lot of money and a lot of investment updating our version of the Green Bay corridor. And I think it's a fine example of a nice development that would certainly enhance the village of Wilmette downtown area. Now, I encourage the Plan Commission to work with Optima to have this development happen under the bounds and certainly reasonable and customary as well as precedent, nothing out of the bounds of ordinary and the precedents that have already taken place here in the village. But I think it's a very nice start, and it's a very, very well, it would be very well improvement on what is currently there at Green Bay and Central. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. People who have not spoken before, we're not taking second comments. Anyone else care to speak who hasn't spoken yet this evening? Yes, ma'am.
Yep, I apologize. I was not planning to speak. Mimi Manding, 1240 Central. We are directly in the shadow of this building at all times, almost. Apparently not at 9 a.m. However, I can repeat a lot of concerns, but mostly the traffic study I find to be ridiculous. I would bet that, so currently there is basically no business happening on that alley. That bank has one customer a day as far as I can tell, and the 12 homes that use the alley, so us, and the 3 people, I think 3 houses behind us with garages. There's 12 people, in theory, that should be using that alley, and our traffic and noise and garbage from the non-existent business is a problem now. I would also hazard a guess that to say that it's a commuter building. I walked. I do not own a car. That is one of the draws of where we live. However, I would hazard a guess that probably half of my neighbors who we can see our roofs from here, most of them drove here. Just a guess. I do not have proof, but it happens quite often. People come home, even if they take the train from work, they come home and then they drive somewhere. Or if it's cold, or if it's raining, or the restaurant and the businesses. It's ludicrous to say that there's not going to be an effect on traffic. And the end of that alley, that mother, I feel for the mother, because you can't get out as a pedestrian. I'm an adult. I can't get to Walgreens safely down that alley. I'm dodging cars. And only one car can get through. And one truck blocks the whole thing. Delivery trucks, Amazon deliveries for this place. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw another comment in back. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Rich DeLeo, 1710 Central Avenue. I have a question and a comment. First is regarding the stormwater management program. It says that it will improve the stormwater management program, but with this whole site being at impervious space surface now, I'd like to get a better understanding what the impact of that is to the village regards to stormwater, either retention or detention program that's proposed for the project. And then also any impact to the village regards to, and to the private utilities too, if they've obtained will serve letters and if there's any impact to any of the services to the village. As far as the comments go, the retail is, as everybody knows, is a concern around the village and other municipalities regards to the types of retail uses and depths of the retail spaces. I don't know if the applicant has contacted a broker or if there's any retail study that's been done to look and understand the depth of the spaces that's proposed and the type of uses in there. Everybody wants a restaurant because that's going to activate the space, but we should look at what the proper depth is here, and I'm concerned about the overall first floor plan with regards to the depth of the retail and those dwelling units behind that, and if that really is the right depth for that retail space that goes down Green Bay Road, as well as the corner. And then I know there's other concerns regarding the first floor plan, so as expertise in the Plan Commission, I'll defer to that under the exceptions that are in the report. And then the other one is renewable energy. I don't know if the applicants looked at anything in regards to solar or wind turbines or anything that we can utilize at the top of the roof if there's an issue. I know at height, but there's a surface area up there that maybe there's an opportunity for renewable energy. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Andrew Gustafson. My family and I live at 720 Park, which is just across from the townhomes, and we're in one of the three houses that one of my neighbors just referenced uses that alley as well to get to our garage. We moved here 6 years ago, and like some of the other comments, one of the reasons we moved here was for the quaintness of the village, the lack of really, high level buildings like this one being proposed. And we very much object, once again, to the scale and the height of the building as it's proposed. We have been extremely pleased, as some of the other people have mentioned, with the growth in the village. I feel like you guys have done a great job with bringing new businesses, bringing new restaurants in downtown. We've been very pleased with that. However, we feel like the zoning ordinances are in place for a reason. We as residents, when we build houses, we do things around our house. We need to obey the ordinances of the village. So to have a developer come in and wow everybody with a big, nice new resident building that can, help with the problem feels a little bit hypocritical to us and not fair. In fact, it feels a little bit like pay to play. They're saying, hey, like we want to build a 7-story building and get around all the ordinances. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you $1.6 million in dollars for low-income housing, but we don't want them in our building. Why do they want a big building? They want a big building because it drives more income for them, drives more yield in their building. I don't understand why this original conversation wasn't, wow, this looks great, but our building ordinances are 4 stories, so let's stick with that. Please come back to us with a proposal that obeys the ordinances of the village. So to go above that strikes me as odd, and I don't understand why it's even in consideration. The other interesting thing about it is, if we think about the public benefits, we're fully supportive of low-income housing. We agree it should be in this building, but none of the public benefits as they've been conveyed are mutually exclusive with the building having to be above 4 stories. The building can still be environmentally friendly and be 4 stories. The building can still improve the stormwater, which they would anyway, because nobody's going to build this building without putting the underground basins in that they're talking about. and still be 4 stories. They can still have low-income housing in here at 4 stories. They can do everything we've talked about as public benefits under the 4-story guidelines. So we talked about this whole PUD process as being able to provide some exemptions. Obviously, they're going for more than some in order to provide a public benefit. But the public benefits that they're proposing seem pretty thin to us. And most of those can still be accomplished, once again, when it's just 4 stories. A few other just kind of observations. One of the kind of public benefits listed is a park. They have an indoor garden, but it's exclusive to the building. Why do they want an indoor garden? I'm assuming because they realize if they did apartments throughout the building, once that Jaguar dealership becomes developed, those northern-faced properties in the middle of the building are pretty unattractive. So they're getting around that by creating an indoor garden because they know that the yield on those properties aren't going to be very good. So how do they get more yield? They go up. So once again, it feels like the neighbors around us are kind of bearing the impact of this and their desires to create more yield for themselves by going higher, and that doesn't seem quite fair. A few other observations in terms of kind of the issues relating to special use and the exemption, the requirements they need to approve in order to get special use. One of them is not to be injurious to the use or enjoyment of other property in the neighborhood. I think we and our neighbors would agree, just based upon the height of this building, the impact of not only the shadows, but also the privacy concerns of we're sitting in our backyard now, and there's somebody on the 6th floor or 7th floor of this building kind of looking straight down into your backyard or into the townhome's windows is injurious to our enjoyment of our property. Number 5, will not substantially diminish property values. We've talked about this. I think it's ludicrous to assume that a 7-story building right next to a 2-story building overlooking somebody's backyard isn't going to impact property values. Minimizes congestion. We've talked about the traffic study a little bit. I just want to offer a little bit different viewpoint. We've worked with the village in the past, some of the residents on Park, to do traffic studies on Park, and the traffic studies have confirmed that the average daily vehicle counts on Park in the 700 block and 800 block are well above the limits for that street, which is supposed to be 1,200 vehicles. We average 3,000 plus vehicles a day.
You have about 1 more minute.
Okay. And this is not only going to increase that issue. So we're already on the list for traffic calming measures, and this is only going to exacerbate that problem. Another kind of just issue related to that, in order to get traffic calming measures approved in the village, you need to have a majority of the residences affected approve the traffic calming measures. So in order to get a speed bump put in, the majority of residents need to approve. But in order to get a 7-story building, we get some time to talk, and that's about it. That doesn't quite seem to align to me. I think that's most of what I wanted to cover. So appreciate your time and consideration. I'd love to continue talking more about this, but recognize we only have so much time, so maybe I'll reach out to you all individually. But once again, thank you.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, this concludes the public comment portion of the program. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give the applicant a chance to respond to some of the comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the members of the community for your feedback. I will try and respond to the various comments that were made. I guess our focus has been on creating a development that respects, fits within, and enhances what the comprehensive plan and the village center master plan call for. One of the priorities for the Green Bay Road corridor has been to provide for retail use. And so that's very much what we focused on along the Green Bay Road corridor. We wrapped it around to the
a portion of the Central Avenue corridor. But just to make the point, one of the exemptions that we're asking for is to avoid adding additional commercial space along the Central Avenue facade that approaches further towards our residential neighbors. So as we've been trying to deal with our planning, what we focused on is trying to centralize the commercial activity along Green Bay Road without driving it down Central Avenue, consistent with the, other than the exception that I noted, consistent with the idea of creating a more vibrant downtown environment. We're also trying to bring to bear more density, which is another goal of the master plan for this location. Someone made reference, I think a couple of speakers made reference to the master plan's program for what they referred to as the Imperial Motors block. And one of the things that the master plan talks about is that this is actually a thought of how to approach things, but it goes on to note that you do have to deal with things on a case-by-case basis. You have to evaluate what the economic conditions are, what the unique characteristics are of each one of the sites. And so the reality is that, as an example, there was at least 4 other alternate plans that were considered as part of the Village Center Master Plan for the Imperial Motors block. And so one of the things that we're looking to do is basically implement one of those alternatives for this location. There's no question that we're asking for relief on height. And we understand and appreciate that we have residential neighbors behind us that is different than what exists to the west of the 611 site. We've put it in context for what happened on the 611 site because of the frontage along Green Bay Road. That doesn't mean we've disregarded what's happening with our neighbors behind us on, particularly in the Village Commons. That's one of the reasons we performed the shadow study that we did, to understand the context of what that was. We've had conversations with people who are concerned about the impact on light and shade on their homes in that area. And what we've been able to do through the computer-generated model that we've presented is that really there isn't an adverse shading impact from what we're proposing to build. That's the objective reality of it. I understand and appreciate the concern that some of our neighbors have for what could be coming. But the reality is that other than a couple of instances over the course of the year, there really will be no disruption of their natural light from our project. I'm not sure what to speak to in terms of the alley. I think people experience different things at different moments in their life when they're doing things on a daily basis. What I can tell you is that we engaged a traffic consultant to analyze the traffic situation, and the village engaged another firm to conduct a peer review of that study without relying upon what our consultant found on their own. And as was previously noted by Mr. Abuna and as reflected in the staff's report, other than one instance, the peer review found that the traffic report, and the one instance did not relate to the alley, but the peer review did indicate that the traffic report was accurate. That being said, what we do in the alley is important because we want to make sure that we're respectful of and accommodating to our neighbors. So at the Appearance Review Commission, as an example, we talked with one of the residents of the townhomes who expressed a concern about the condition of the alley itself. I immediately turned to a member of the village staff with that neighbor and said, we would absolutely welcome the opportunity with the village to resurface the alley. Not the entirety on our own part, but to contribute towards a resurfacing of the alley. One of the other things that was raised and relates to the condition of the alley that came up with some of the residents at the Appearance Review Commission is that someone inquired as to what the impact on utilities will be. As part of our redevelopment, there are 3 ComEd poles along the alley behind our property. Those 3 poles are going to come down. There will be no poles, no longer be any utility poles behind our property, and that will all be underground service and serviced by the ComEd transformer that's noted to be at grade on the property. One of the other impacts that was discussed was the consequences of our development on our neighbors' property values. Our experience as a developer has been when we've completed a development, given the quality of what we do, that the property values in the surrounding area have actually increased because of the investment in value we've created through our developments. And we would expect the same to be the case in this instance. I had noted a moment ago, and I apologize for jumping a bit, our commitment to try and fulfill the purposes of the master plan. A good bit of discussion has been had about deviation from the plan, and one of the things that the PUD process actually is intended to accommodate is variations from the plan. That's from the zoning ordinance. That is the actual purpose why we're all here. It is up to all of you to assess whether or not that variation is worthwhile. Are we doing enough to fulfill the goals and policies of the village to merit these changes? We believe we are, but you will be the final arbiter of that. A good bit of discussion was had about affordable housing. We're very committed, and the family that owns Optima is very committed to affordable housing. And we're doing a lot of work in affordable housing as a company right now to actually launch an initiative. But when we looked at this project and looked at what it would take to execute on a project in this location and to be able to appeal to the market that's necessary for this project to be a success in a time of increasing construction costs and increasing real estate taxes, the way we looked at it was we could not accommodate the on-site units. I'm not happy to tell you that that was the conclusion we came to, but we didn't stop there. What we decided to do was figure out a way where we could create a long-term, essentially perpetual solution by providing a mechanism, a vehicle for the village of Wilmette to have sustainable, ongoing, affordable housing in the units that we're seeking to create. We believe that a $1.6 million donation is a meaningful contribution in the context of the 611 PUD. I believe the developer in that instance made an $80,000 contribution in total. So our goal is to try and facilitate the village's objective. I've spent, people talked about what the city of Chicago provides. There are different standards that the city of Chicago has for different areas of the city and different buyout prices and things along that nature. But we believe that we've come to you with not just a check, but a solution. We believe by identifying SEPA and trying to foster a relationship that we hope is the beginning of a long-term relationship between SEPA and the village of Wilmette, that we're setting Wilmette on a course of sustainable, affordable housing, not just sustainable with respect to the 14 units that will be created as a result of this development, but sustainable in terms of an ongoing relationship where there's a model to create ongoing affordable housing units to serve the people who live or work in the village of Wilmette. Bear with me as I go back through some of the notes, if you don't mind. In a moment, I'm going to ask, Fran, actually, could you speak to the question on the stormwater management? Fran Fazio, who is a vice president with Manhart Consulting, our civil engineer, will speak to the questions that someone raised about stormwater management.
Yes, Fran Fazio, Manhart Consulting. We are at One Overlook Point in Lincolnshire. This property is, yes, as one of the people pointed out, completely impervious surface. And the rainwater goes into the sewer, out to the sewer in Green Bay Road. What this project is going to do is we're going to have a stormwater detention underground basin vault in the basement under the parking lot that will take all of the rainwater and then slowly release it out to the sewers, taking into account not only the rainwater release rate, but the sanitary sewer release rate. And we did a comprehensive study of the building's use and the impact on the sewers, and we've presented that to the village without comment of how the impacts of this development will improve the sewer system in that general area.
I'll just also note, as to the affordable housing, we're very excited that as part of what's happening, that this is helping to generate the creation of the Morganti Wilson Foundation, which is put together by Wilmette residents to provide for the future affordable housing in Wilmette as well. There were a number of comments or questions related to sustainability. As I noted before, we're pursuing a Green Globes sustainability certification, and we'll be working with our consultants as we get further into the design of the actual systems of the building to pursue that certification. Traffic generally generated from the building, there were a number of questions and comments about that. One question was raised about valet parking. We identified the idea of providing for valet parking to the extent it's necessary. So if we actually are generating traffic along Green Bay Road, the goal for us is not to add that parking, to add more traffic on the alley, which some people expressed a concern about. What we've proposed in our plans is that to the extent a valet parking service is necessary, we would use the drop-off zone on Central Avenue proximate to the residential entrance, and we would be able to take the benefit of the Metro parking lot for evening traffic, where there's unrestricted parking in the parking lot. I think it's after 4 o'clock during the weekdays and after 3 o'clock on Saturdays, and that would be where any valet parking would be pursued. A variety of people made reference to concerns about or objection to the design and architecture of the building, to which, Mr. Chairman, I'll restate your quote of earlier this evening that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. I don't think there's any project that has satisfied every person observing or experiencing that project, but I can tell you, I will restate that from a design perspective, we've won 45 national and international design awards, and we are very focused on the aesthetics of the buildings that we create. A few people talked about bird friendliness. This came up briefly at the Appearance Review Commission last evening as well. I think it's an area that's gaining increasing attention nationally. I think it's something that a lot of communities are beginning to investigate. The bulk of what's being done with respect to birds in Chicago is focused on really major metropolitan urban centers, and in terms of the impact that those high-rise illuminated developments are having on the bird population. So people are having conversations in San Francisco and New York City, communities like that. Chicago has taken a voluntary step, downtown Chicago, and a lot of this relates to office buildings in the urban environment, where historically you would have office buildings illuminated in the evening. And so the city of Chicago has actually embarked upon a voluntary program that they call Lights Out Chicago, where they're working with office building owners in Chicago to get those people to agree to turn off lights in their building. I believe it's from 11 at night to 4 in the morning, as a means of trying to reduce the attractiveness of the high rises for birds. The city of New York just adopted an ordinance relating to bird glass in new construction, but having identified it and having applied it to only new construction, one of the things that the city of New York has decided is to not trigger the effectiveness of that ordinance for over a year, so that people in a development process would have the ability to accommodate that in their planning. Projections made by the Real Estate Board of the City of New York anticipate that developers would experience a 3 to 50% increase in the cost of glass to try and deal with this issue. I'm not trying to make light of that issue at all. I just want to tell you what we see the current state of play as being, and we think that given the height of our building, given the area that it's in, given that we are not a dense high-rise urban core, that it isn't necessarily something that needs to be done at this project, at this location, at this time. But as we're doing internally as a result of these conversations, I would encourage the Village of Wilmette to think about a prospective policy for how you would want to envision dealing with bird glass. So we'll have 108 residential units in the building. Industry standard is that you retain 50% of your residents in a given month, in a given year, excuse me. We actually expect that we'll have more retention than that for a project such as what we're proposing here. And I say that by means of talking about the fact that if you just took the bare industry standard and said that you'd have turnover of 54 units over the course of 12 months and divided that by the 12 months, the amount of move-in and move-out traffic that would be experienced at our location would be relatively modest. What we've tried to do by locating the access to the property along the alley is to preserve the current access points to the property. So where we've cited the access points right now in our plan are where two of the entry drives are for the current site location. And what we've done is, as I noted early in the presentation, tried to preserve the segregation of vehicular and residential and pedestrian traffic around the site, and to have it at the boundary of the site rather than intersecting the site is one of the concerns that we would have to make a safety condition worse. Safety was something that was brought up last night at the Appearance Review Commission, and we took that very much to heart, which I hope you appreciate by the fact that we, in less than 24 hours, we revised our plans to create a better view corridor for safety, to add illumination at the alley to provide for greater safety for for folks and to raise and respond to the idea of increasing the depth of the sidewalk by changing the planting requirements along Central Avenue. So the alley itself is interesting because at our end of the alley, it's a 20-foot wide alley. And so there's really no issue in terms of the ability for vehicles to pass each other at our end of the alley. We understand a concern of the residents about the fact that that alley then narrows along Washington Street to 16 feet wide. And while that allows for the passage of two vehicles, we understand that if other things are happening, that may not be the most ideal situation. So one of the things we are absolutely open to would be to work with anyone who's delivering to our property, who's servicing our property, to make sure that they're doing ingress and egress out of the Central Avenue side of the property, where it's more where there's less traffic down the entirety of the alley, and it is at a wider point in the alley. And part of the traffic report highlights the fact that we have the capacity for truck movement to our property in and out, going right back in from Central and back out along Central. And that's something that we would be absolutely open to discussing. There are other things that could be done at the blind spot at Washington Avenue to address some of the concerns that the mother raised, and that could be putting warning signs for traffic exiting at the sidewalk, putting in speed bumps, as one of the gentlemen speaking about Park Avenue mentioned, or putting in a mirror to allow people to actually see what's coming down the alley. But these are things that can just be done to try and take a flexible approach to what people's concerns are. The other point I'll make is that when we talk about having the vehicular access at the rear of the building, people express concerns about trash, they express concerns about loading, things like that. We've provided for all of those things to be enclosed. There won't be any trash receptacles outside. We have overhead doors for both of the loading areas as well as for the garage itself. And so our goal in creating that is to try and create an isolation of any traffic concerns from our neighbors. The other thing we've tried to do, as I noted earlier, is not treat the western facade of the building as the back of the house, if you will. We have provided the same architectural detail and care in the design of the west facade facing our neighbors along Central, so that we give them the benefit of the design of what we're creating. And I'll come back to the height question. If the townhomes are about 2 stories high and you built a 4-story building as allowed by the code, I think the concerns that have been expressed would be no different. So while some folks have spoken about building to what's permitted under the code, I don't think a 4-story building at 52 feet of height would be, at the end of the day, more palatable from the emotional perspective that they have on what may be happening. Because at the end of the day, we've demonstrated that from a shadow perspective, there's no material difference between the two heights. And for both instances, there is only impact on the townhomes behind us at very limited occurrences during the course of the year. I'm hoping I've addressed the public comments and questions. I'm sure I've missed something.
Yeah. The retail, I think there was questions about the retail.
Thank you, John. So we believe that the retail is a great design. We believe that the depth of the retail, the transparency along the Green Bay frontage, the indoor-outdoor space, the availability of the public parking are all great attributes. We recently leased a space just like this to a restaurant at one of our downtown properties, where it had this corner with two of the facades on the corner being all glass and the back of the house being done on the interior. But I know people may not want to hear from me, so I'm going to ask Tim Rasmussen and Scott Reinisch from SVN Commercial, who worked with us on that lease and who actually are from the restaurant group of SVN Commercial, to speak to that.
Tim Rasmussen with SVN Chicago Commercial.
Scott Reinisch, SVN Chicago Commercial.
You know, the issue was raised about the depth of the space and the ceiling height. And I think that if you look at rather than thinking about it, the depth of the space, look at it as the width of the space off the central, which at that point is over 50 feet. And in general, it's 45 feet. If you look at most of the restaurants, we were just in downtown Wilmette having dinner tonight, and the vast majority of those storefronts are far less than 45 feet in width. In terms of the height, a ceiling height that's 13 feet is pretty substantial. Contemporary design today has become, you know, a pretty significant industry trend. The light, the air, those are all important elements to what people are looking for today in restaurant design and functionality. So we see this as really a great addition. There's parking, there's great visibility. I love the fact that there's this setback providing some, you know, functionality from the weather, creating a nice outdoor amenity, which few restaurants have. It's difficult to find that, especially in downtown Wilmette with the narrow sidewalk. So I think all in all, this is, you know, is a really nice addition. I like the fact that it can potentially be subdivided into up to 3 different spaces. Probably 2 would be ideal. So I can't imagine that this won't have the same kind of success we had with Optimus project downtown and many other projects that we've been involved with here on the North Shore. A couple of example, Mino's and Fred's Garage, kind of contemporary designs that have attracted significant business in the community. And I think the other thing that's really important is a space like this, like, I don't know if everybody's noticed, downtown Wilmette has become a very attractive environment. We get calls now on a regular basis, which we didn't get previously. Wilmette, Winnetka, Evanston were not considered places that restaurant operators wanted to go. You know, Glen Kiefer just came into town. We were involved in that project. So these are exciting developments, which I think will add to the vitality of this community in a very important way. And will bring contemporary, modern facilities that people are looking for today.
Great, thank you. Sure. I guess I'll just piggyback on that real quick and add that along with Tim, I've been doing this 11 years. All forms of retail, predominantly restaurants. Tim also didn't mention very much. He was also, besides being a commercial broker, was an long-term restaurant operator himself. So he's very familiar with the depth and space and sizes of restaurants. Now again, I know that's the preference here. For a restaurant, we handle all forms of retail use, like the property that we handle, that the Optimum building downtown, which we handle the leasing for a restaurant, which again was very, again, similar to this space. This is what restaurants in particular are looking for, this type of building, the ceiling height, the floor-to-ceiling windows. I also like in a property like this, I happen to be from Deerfield, live in Deerfield. If you notice, I cited the main artery in Deerfield of Waukegan and Deerfield. There's a restaurant called Bobby's. That restaurant there, if you notice the frontage, it's front to ceiling windows on Deerfield Road. There's no egress on Deerfield Road. There's no egress. There's even no visibility on Waukegan Road. That entrance is is in back. You have to drive behind into a parking lot even to get to that entrance. The point of what I'm getting at here is that it's, with something like this, having this type of exposure is exactly what restaurants in the suburbs are looking for, and that width, or the depth issue is handled, again, as Tim mentioned, by the fact that if you don't look at it from the Green Bay side, you look at the depth from the central piece, and you have no question marks there. So this is an ideal building, ideal size for any retail use.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any final comments from the applicant?
One minor point to make, Mr. Chairman, and that is that one question was raised or concern was expressed about the trees that we provided for on the roof at the western facade, and that would contribute adversely to a further diminution of light for our neighbors, and just that's not what the result is based on the computer model that we've generated. We viewed that as a benefit to the residential community to the west to create a further buffer of the structure, and it does not in any way, the trees do not in any way add to any shading effect. In closing, I'll just say thank you all. Thank you for your time, your patience, your consideration. Thank you to the members of the community who support and who question and have concerns about this development, because that's what the process is all about. We're here because we believe we're creating something special to locate in the village of Wilmette, something that furthers the vision of the village of Wilmette itself as expressed by its comprehensive plan and master plan. And we are excited about the opportunity to deliver this project and have a positive impact on the economic life, but also on our neighbors. And so we look forward to the opportunity to continue the dialogue, to work with our neighbors, to make sure that folks understand what it is that we're trying to create and find ways for us to meet the concerns that they have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that concludes the presentation by the applicant. Just for the record, circling back on the stormwater management issue, the village engineer does review all of the stormwater calculations so that the design of the stormwater retention and release system is done in conjunction with village stormwater management policies and with the village engineer. To move this forward, the chair would like to entertain a motion to get this matter before us. This will require a motion from one of the committee members. If you go to page 19 of your package, under action required, okay, there is a paragraph that essentially is the motion you need to make to put the matter before the Plan Commission. Okay. Well, you can read it. One of the commissioners needs to actually make the motion.
Right, so someone will just basically say, so moved.
So moved.
Yeah, exactly.
You want me to read it, or are you going to read it?
No, you got it.
Okay.
You got it.
Go ahead.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Okay. So move that, this is page 19, right?
Yep.
Approval of this request entails a recommendation to approve the plan unit development, preliminary plan, and special use to permit the construction of a mixed-use building containing commercial space and approximately 108 dwelling units located in the Village Center zoning district, pedestrian commercial west at 1210 Central Avenue, in conformance with the plans submitted. The use to run with the use.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
So, just so the procedure is clear, so the motion is to basically to approve. Aye vote would be to recommend an approval to the village board. A no vote would be basically not recommend an approval to the village board. However, I imagine that there'll be some discussion, which we'll add on to this motion through our deliberations here, which can be added into at any point we need to do that.
The motion can be amended at any point
Yeah.
before it's finally voted on.
Right, it's not an all or nothing if the commission decides not to make it an all or nothing.
Okay. Comments by commissioners?
I have a number of questions and comments. So let's start with Green Globes. I'm more familiar with the LEED program and the various levels that are affiliated with LEED. Are there levels associated with Green Globes? Is there a level commitment here that the developer is making with this project? I'm a little light on what the actual plan is with respect to Green Globes.
Can you address that question?
Attempt to address that question.
Because I will be the first to admit that I'm not as familiar with Green Globe as I am with LEED.
And just for a point of reference, the village, I believe, John, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe their last two PUDs, Green Globes.
Last PUD, yeah.
Last PUD.
Artist Senior Living was a Green Globes.
Artist was a Green Globes. I'm not sure if...
And I believe they were trying to get Green Globes gold minimum. I think that was their goal.
There's various levels.
There are, so
There's various levels.
Yeah, there's various levels.
All right,
Yep.
so then it's just the first part.
Yeah.
Is there a commitment to a specific level here?
We have not formally made a commitment to a specific level. We've agreed to make a commitment to achieve the new construction multifamily sustainable certification, which requires, if you'll bear with me, it requires that we have to meet minimum requirements for energy and water efficiency and meet certain basic minimum thresholds. So we have to meet a 35% score on their overall minimum requirements, and then from that, in addition, we either have to achieve a 15% or greater projected energy consumption savings over the established baseline, and must meet all three of the energy minimum requirements, which relates to either an Energy Star score or an energy use intensity reduction, or we can pick an energy efficient, and we have to achieve an energy efficient equipment and products, which is either Energy Star qualified products, Federal Emergency and Federal Energy Management Program energy and water efficient products, or I apologize, I'm not familiar with the acronym, something that is AHAM verified. And then we have to engage in an energy performance monitoring and tracking to show over time that we are maintaining the level of energy efficiency that's called out by the certification requirements. So it's not simply a moment in time achieve certification. You actually have to continue to demonstrate maintenance with that certification, which actually is a differentiation from LEED, where once you've made it, you're kind of done, and whatever happens after that, you don't have to worry about it. There's an ongoing maintenance requirement here. Alternately, alternate to meeting energy requirements, we can focus on meeting certain water requirements, and so in that case, we would have to achieve a 15% or greater projected water consumption savings over the established baseline and meet both of the minimum water requirements. So we have to have a prescriptive path with low flow fixtures and fittings, and they specify what types of low flow products and standards have to be met to achieve that. As an example, shower heads at 1.75 gallons per minute, just as an illustration. In addition, we would have to achieve an EPA water score 15% or greater projected water consumption savings by achieving a water score of 70 or greater, using the EPA's 1 to 100 water score for multifamily buildings within Portfolio Manager, which is the government's energy tracking system, Portfolio Manager. And then the same concept where we have to have this ongoing measurement and management of water to make sure we're preserving the certification.
How does the Green Globe certification path that you're pursuing compare to what the village would ordinarily otherwise require under the building code or the energy code?
This would be a higher standard.
Okay. Can you quantify or?
I'm sorry?
Can you quantify?
I can't quantify it. I just know that our basic building is intended to meet the village's base standards, and our goal is to go beyond that. That's the public benefit, is to achieve this higher certification. So the baseline for what Green Globes provides is a higher standard than the base building, and that's why this is a public benefit.
And a similar question with respect to stormwater, it's been noted a few times, the site is all impervious surface, so it's kind of a low bar to clear in terms of improving the condition. The stormwater management plan that you are proposing here, how does that compare with what the village would ordinarily otherwise require in a sort of the as-of-right situation?
I don't know that I know the answer to that. I don't know. Fran?
We also have the village engineer here who can also probably provide an opinion, but let the applicant go first.
So we are meeting what the village is requiring. We are improving what's there now, but we are meeting the requirements of the current village code.
Okay.
I guess, any further comments?
No.
Right.
I want to, I have a few more questions, but I do want to just, before I dig in again, thank you for your time, your consideration, your willingness to invest in Wilmette. It's incredibly important, and I know it's an incredibly big undertaking to just get to this point here. That said, this process is intended to refine your plan, and I'm sure you're hearing perspectives that you had considered and perhaps some you hadn't. My overall reaction to the plan, I guess first of all, I have no opposition to modern design. I think it was stated yesterday evening that Wilmette is a diverse community, including a diversity of architecture and diversity of design, and that's something attractive about the community. So on the one hand, the opportunity for contemporary design, I think, exists. However, it needs to respect and respond to the environment within which it's being placed. And I think that happens in a number of ways. One is just a pure architectural consideration. Another way is with respect to the scale and the massing. And I think we've heard several comments this evening about the scale and the massing. Another way is with respect to how this building actually engages with the community and engages with the pedestrian community in particular. And you've talked about some of the considerations you've made with respect to sidewalk passability and things like that, and which are all greatly appreciated. But what I don't see in just the overall layout is a layout that engages with the community fully. I think you heard yesterday evening, and I echo that the comment about continuing an active space along Central. And I understand the challenges with respect to continuing retail along Central, and I don't think that's the necessary here. However, putting up a blank wall along part of Central is really turning your back on the pedestrian community. I think the 14-foot height is also an important consideration for the pedestrian engagement. So regardless of whether the restaurant community would support it, there are other considerations for that height requirement that I think need to be reconsidered. The retail space, the depth itself, again, I understand that we've heard testimony about the community being, the restaurant market supporting those narrower depths. I think we saw in the staff report concerns the other way. So I would be concerned about the developer shortchanging himself when it comes to the retail opportunity here and not leveraging the opportunity you have now to create a successful, to deliver on the promise that you're making here, which is to put retail in this space. I want to commend you on the affordable housing approach. I appreciate that you've brought a solution forward as opposed to just stroking a check, which is the easiest route for a developer to take. I'm so grateful to have heard overwhelming support in favor of affordable housing and even affordable housing on site. I understand the challenges, though, and what you talked about in terms of challenges with respect to the assessments, increasing construction costs. Those are important considerations as to whether it makes sense to put affordable housing on one particular site or another. But I just want to be clear that, you know, the dollar amount that you're committing is being used to, it's being leveraged to create 14 affordable housing units that don't exist today. And if you were to put those units on site, I suspect that number would be something less than 14. And that's perhaps a question for the community to consider as to whether it makes sense to put 14 units elsewhere in the community in a scattered approach, or whether it makes sense to put some lesser number of them at this building. And I think it's a question for probably other bodies to weigh in on, other than us, quite frankly. But I do commend you on providing a solution that leverages those dollars. I recognize that as going above and beyond what developers typically do in this instance. I am still unclear on the public parking aspect of this. It was described in the materials that we received as unsecured parking. I see, though, that they are accessed through a door off of the alley. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. What is meant by unsecured in that respect?
Yes.
So when we say it is enclosed, and there will be an overhead door that anyone will be able to access through. So if you were a resident and you were a public parker, you would both go through the same gate. As you approach the gate would go up, you would enter the same way. The resident would go down the ramp and turn to the right and approach a transponder reader that would open a secure door that would be for the residents' secure parking. You go in there, only residents have access to that space, and then the door closes, and that's the end of the story. For the public parking, you're going into that entry door, you're parking, someone else can come in the next car and go. Now, so that's the difference between the secure and the unsecure. The public parking is openly accessible, but we had received a number of comments from the village staff in terms of how they wanted us to deal with that unsecure, if you will, public parking. So there was a request that we add a number of call buttons in the garage, so that would ring automatically to 911 if someone hit one of those buttons from a safety perspective. There was a request that we provide as part of our camera security system that there's coverage in the garage. There was a requirement that we make sure that both the secure and the public parking were accessible by emergency services. And so we've absolutely agreed to every single one of those things. The last thing in the world we want to do is, when we say secure or unsecure, we want people to be safe. And so we've worked with the village to try and provide the solutions in the parking to make sure that that's the case.
Is there a way for parkers to discern whether there's availability?
Yeah, so that was part of the conversation we had with staff, and so there will be a part of the garage entry sign will indicate whether or not there is publicly available parking there. So before you actually go into that go open the door, you're going to know whether or not there's a parking space available.
So are these spaces intended to be used by people who are patronizing your retail space or more broadly?
So as part of the conversations we've had, we originally talked about dedicated commercial spaces for our property and our retail, but as part of the conversations, we wanted to provide a broader benefit to the community, and depending upon what the individual demand is at any given time, those spaces would be available for anyone in the community. It's not tied to a specific use. It's not tied to a specific space. That, by the way, is one of the objectives of the master plan, is that you don't dedicate parking to specific spaces. And so we thought that that was a good addition to the plan.
Is there a limit how long someone can be parked there?
What we're asking is that people wouldn't have, that the public parking would basically be 2-hour parking. So that it is not, as I may have mentioned earlier, we don't want someone to say, I can park my car, walk across the street to the train during wintertime, my car is enclosed all day, I'm going to get in my warm car and I'm going to drive. That's not the intent behind this, which is why we want to put basically a 2-hour time limit on that.
And who's policing and enforcing that?
We would be.
So I've heard this described as a transit-oriented development, which obviously the proximity to the train station certainly leads one to conclude that. But can you talk about the features of the development itself that are transit-oriented?
So the proximity is the key that makes us transit-oriented. To facilitate that, we're going to put a transit kiosk in our lobby, so it will tell people when, because there's a bus stop right in front of the Imperial Motors site. We have the Metra across the street, so we would integrate with the Metra and PACE systems to be able to have a display for our residents to tell them when different trains services are coming, to try and get people to interact with the publicly available transit. We're also providing for on-site bicycles, which is another feature of, bicycle storage, which is another feature of most transit-oriented developments. But it's really the proximity. And I guess the other thing that is typically a feature is we don't allocate, just like the parking for commercial parking, one of the other features of transit-oriented development is you don't take a parking space and say, that's for unit 501, that's for unit 302. You don't specially allocate the parking. You keep the parking flexible, and that's another aspect of transit-oriented development.
The big aspect of transit-oriented development that I'm familiar with is a reduction in the parking ratio. And I think if I can crunch the numbers correctly, you're at about a ratio of 1.68 per dwelling unit?
6.4.
6.4?
Yep.
Which seems high for a transit-oriented development, but also seems to intersect with the issues we've heard about regarding traffic volumes and use of the alley itself and sort of car behaviors by residents. Can you speak to whether the ratio is driven by your market needs and demands, or is it more driven by the village's demands? What's behind that?
Behind that is our assessment of the market. While we lease to anyone and everyone, we anticipate that the development will appeal particularly to an older demographic in the community, folks who may be looking to sell their single-family home but yet stay in the community that they've spent a good part of their life in, stay close to their friends and family and places of worship and healthcare, et cetera. And so our assessment is that those are folks who are accustomed to having a vehicle, whether they use it or not. And that's really the appeal for us in creating the parking ratio that we have. I think what experience has shown is that use doesn't match in a transit-oriented development. The use won't match the capacity as behaviors change, but people like the comfort of knowing they have the ability to have a place for their car in the market that we anticipate renting here. Did that answer your question?
It does. It's market-driven is the answer. I guess I'm having trouble reconciling the nature of a transit-oriented development with such a high parking ratio.
Well, the parking ratio is higher in part because the unit mix is larger units.
Mm-hmm.
So we're expecting people to, we're expecting a lot of couples, maybe some families in the building.
Okay.
This is not the building that would be built downtown for millennials.
Who is your target demographic?
As I said, we see the great appeal is to allow current residents to remain in the community. And so for us, that's going to skew probably to folks who are going to be 55 plus in terms of age. It may skew a little bit lighter than that. Just as the master plan indicated, we think there's a market for divorced people in the community as well. And we expect as people are transitioning into the North Shore area, into Wilmette, that they may choose to rent with us before they purchase a home in the community.
Do you have any, you mentioned the valet potential. Is there any concern with the proximity of the lay-by lane to the restaurant space?
No, because the lay-by lane, I think, starts 90 feet from the intersection, so we don't think that there's an issue.
Well, I'm wondering if it's too far away for convenience.
Well, we don't think it's too far away for the convenience factor based on what we've looked at in terms of proximity for valet, and we think it also further serves a less disruptive impact on the community by kind of double purposing the lay-by lane. And again, just to be clear, we don't know that there's going to be a valet. We're just trying to future plan for what may happen.
And this lay-by lane would be on Central?
It would be on Central. It's in front of the residential entrance.
Is there any consideration for it being on Green Bay so it doesn't feed into the neighborhood for, I know you're doubling up on the use of it, but...
Yeah, there's really not an ability to put it because of the turn lane off of Green Bay and the traffic impacts of the left turn of the train effect. That would actually create more traffic concerns by doing anything on Green Bay Road, and that's why we decided to put it on Central.
The village does require a valet license, and part of that could be the route to the parking. That'd be the least impactful to the neighborhood. So,
And we would
it
have
could be
no
something that could be worked out at the time. So,
and we would have no problem requiring that of anyone who was a user.
As you say that out loud, I start to think about the route, and it's exacerbating the issues that were talked about on Park and on the alley, unless you're just doing a U-turn right there, and which is also not ideal.
for a different brain function than mine.
Yeah.
The engineers will work on that.
How many cars can fit in that lay-by lane?
Two.
Okay. Was there any consideration to doing more of a porte cochere, which I realize results in two curb cuts and sort of two crossings with pedestrians, but maybe kind of provides more of a moment of arrival and preserves a little bit more of the sidewalk width through that area?
Well, I think for us, that would create a more adverse impact for the pedestrians coming along Central Avenue. And so when we looked at the totality of the impact, we felt like segregating, we were very much focused on segregating traffic from pedestrian.
What does, and I don't know if you need to refer to a site plan, in the area where the lay-by exists, what is the resulting sidewalk width?
It is the standard sidewalk width. It's in the parkway portion. I don't recall what that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to 5 feet.
Okay. You mentioned that you are seeking to implement one of the Imperial Motors plans from the master plan. Do we
So we're
I
close to alternate C.
Okay. Do
But
we know
that's,
what
that is a, we're close, we're not there, but when concerns were expressed, when people talked about the intention being that there was only going to be a two-story building there, I'll just say that one of the examples was a four-story mixed-use building. So the original plan, the main proposal in the master plan for the Imperial Motors block was a two-story commercial building on that corner, and then preserving the facade of the Imperial Motors building and having retail there, and then setting back and having, I believe, a four-story residential building there. But then there was also, I believe, some type of center treatment between the two, just as there was on the 611 master plan concept. You know, there was an intention that there be two buildings and an access down the middle of the 611 site as well. And just as, you know, I don't know whether the 611 site had alternate plans and whether I should say, I know it had alternate plans. I don't know if what was built reflected anything close to that alternate plan, but what I can tell you is alternate C provided for two buildings, two mixed-use buildings on the Imperial Motors block of 4 stories.
Which I guess segues into kind of my overall reaction and comment here, which is that, you know, the PUD process is intended to provide flexibility so that, you know, you don't have to comply with the letter of the law, but you have to comply with the spirit of the law. And when you talk about a comprehensive plan for the Imperial Motors site, to suggest that what you're proposing is matching one of those plans is a little bit disingenuous, in the sense that this site is confined to a small part of the overall master plan site. And this site is being developed and designed really in isolation to what may happen on the Imperial Motors site, because you have no control of that. You have no idea no, we really don't. We can only guide through the master plan and through the zoning ordinance. And when I see your plan, the PUD process, again, is designed to provide flexibility so you can bend the rules, but it's not intended to blow the roof off. And what I see in your proposal is, you know, it's not providing for an efficient massing of buildings on the site. It's not providing sort of that trade-off, other than the affordable housing payment is really the only substantial public benefit that I see here. I don't see how your design has mitigated or offset any of the impacts of the relief that you're seeking from us. You know, the height is the elephant in the room. You know, you're proposing, I think someone accurately stated it, you're proposing to exceed the current standard by 50% in terms of the number of floors. That's not insubstantial. You are seeking height relief 20, 30, 40% over the height allowances that are permitted. Again, that's not insubstantial. Now, if the building were designed in such a way that those heights were confined to certain parts of the site, it'd be a different story. But you're talking about setting a building that is effectively lot line to lot line. I'm not going to ignore the setback on the alley. Obviously, that's there. But you're setting a single mass on the entirety of the site with, you know, yes, articulation in the roof lines, but for the most part, it's a single mass on the site. I think the ground floor height all the more dictates you need to maintain that height just to even support, from a proportionality standpoint, what you're proposing to put over that ground floor. So I would ask you to reconsider the massing. Now, I understand your pro forma makes certain assumptions about revenues and the number of units primarily, and a lot of that drives what you're asking for. But I would ask you to reconsider your unit count and the massing and the density. Again, I support density. I support density at this location, but I think the way that you are proposing it is out of character with the surrounding properties. And it is certainly not consistent with the comprehensive plan, let alone the zoning ordinance. So I would ask you to reconsider the massing, the overall plan, kind of take a more thoughtful approach to fitting the design within the existing character of this downtown area.
Would it be all right if I addressed a couple of the points?
Please proceed.
Thank you for your comments. Couple of things just to note as to how we've been thinking about some of the aspects. We like to think in terms of feet rather than floors, and we do that because we're a very efficient builder. And so when we look at the fact, if you were to look at, just as an example, and I understand the locational difference, 611 has a higher base building and is 5 stories. And we're at 60, and we're at 62 feet, and we're at 6 stories for the base building. And so I just point out that we're able to, because of our means of construction, because we have a 9-inch thick slab, that's how we're able to create more stories in less space in height. And so I understand you have a concern about both, but I just wanted to make a point that for us, the height in feet is a more apt reference point given the way we do construction as opposed to others. That 9-inch slab is also a perspective for us on the first floor height. So the 14-foot measurement point that I learned in the process of going through this is from the first floor slab to the top of the second floor slab to measure the volume of what 14 feet actually is. And so for us, because of our 9-inch slab, we're creating a clear ceiling to 12 foot 3 inches. And what we concluded, apart from the attractive, what we heard back from the brokers, what we looked at was the 100% transparency that we're creating along Green Bay Road as being an attractive element to make that a very inviting interaction between the members of the community and the space. So I just wanted to share that perspective, and I appreciate your comments.
We're beyond our 10:30 target. The commissioners want to keep the discussion moving. Okay, let's continue. Other comments?
So just disperse specific questions. How will the loading docks work? How many cars can fit or trucks can fit into those, and then they have to back out?
Yes, so the loading docks will take one truck in each one, and then there would be, yes, a backing out and exit. So is that a 3-point turn? I think it's a 3-point turn. So you're pulling in. You would pull into the dock off of Central, just as an example. You'd back up towards Washington, and then you'd exit out right onto Central.
And yesterday, I think you mentioned that Amazon and package deliveries would go into those docks as well?
Yes.
It seems like with 100 units, you would have more than perhaps one of those coming at a time. How will that jam be managed?
So the likelihood of a conflict between, I expect that we will not have, the occasions when we have both docks in use would be limited, just from a delivery schedule.
Is that something that was modeled in the traffic study? Is there analysis on a building? How, is that just an assumption you're making?
I do not believe that was modeled in the traffic study, but it's how we operate apartment communities, and in Chicago and in Arizona, and base this plan off of meeting the demands that we've experienced there at far larger communities.
Would there be any way to include more of a roundabout type delivery process in the basement just for smaller deliveries in the garage?
Say that again, around
something that where they would come out.
Actually go into the garage and come back out.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could theoretically create, direct them to park in the garage, if that was something everyone thought would be beneficial to manage those deliveries. I just, there is a trade-off there in terms of the parking use, but we could designate a parking space as a delivery space just as an overflow, if that's the type of concept that you're talking about.
The difficulty that I could see is then getting the package deliveries from the garage up to the
they'd have to walk
residential
out,
units.
yeah.
Well, I hate to be the cynic, but I think they're just going to pull over in that lay-by lane
Yeah.
and run them in, so they're not going to use the loading dock you have. So.
Well, I will tell you that I expect Amazon drivers to do everything under the sun. The UPS, the FedEx, the more professional staff you can get. But yes, we do find that the people who do this as a side gig become a challenge. But again, that's one of the benefits of our having on-site management, is to be able to deal with issues that arise.
Quick question, looking the other way, a lot of discussion around sort of the alleyway and the vehicular and pedestrian traffic, and rightly so, is some significant issue there, right? But going the other way, you mentioned briefly about sort of the pedestrian crosswalk of Green Bay Road at Central, so the expected increase of pedestrian traffic there. Tell me again the enhancements that around that intersection, because it's tough crossing Green Bay Road regardless of what light you're at. This is only going to create more, how can we improve that? How can we make that intersection better?
Ask Lou Wade, would you mind?
Currently the intersection is equipped with a crosswalk and a walk signal. However, it's a standard crosswalk with the parallel lines. What we're suggesting that we enhance it with more high visibility, the ladder style, that are more visible for the drivers and visible for the pedestrians, so it kind of creates a more safer environment for the pedestrians to cross. And then as far as the walk signal, we're recommending that would be changed into the countdown timer, the type you see a lot in downtown. So pedestrian would know how much time they have left in order to complete their cross of the intersection. And those two features have proven to be more safe for pedestrians as well as for the drivers.
Yeah. So off the wall question, and this is a topic that comes up every couple of years in terms of a safer crossing of Green Bay Road. Is there, was there any consideration to some kind of underground passage and, pedestrian and bicyclist friendly way to cross east and west
It was
Green Bay?
brought up at the Appearance Review Commission by a resident, and it may also have been brought up in a letter from a resident. I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
No, there was no consideration on our part of doing that. That being said, given that we are excavating, if the village wants to undertake that underpass, that we would coordinate the work with, as we're doing it, we would be more than happy as part of our construction process to facilitate that happening.
There's also some major storm sewers that run underneath Green Bay Road, which would probably preclude being able to put an underpass.
How about putting a bridge over, pedestrian bridge?
The pedestrian bridge is certainly possible. It's just that it requires additional landing areas on either side. So it would be, be essentially putting the access point to the bridge well in front of where the entrance to this property would be, and would be putting it either into the parking lot of the metro station or onto the train tracks.
Right.
So it's just, there's a lot of real estate that is required to get.
But it's already, there's a berm. I mean, it's already higher on that end anyway. That's something that
Probably not
would be
high.
easier than underground.
Probably not high enough.
Not high enough, you still have to go
Yeah.
up, but it's, you gain some.
I'd like to ask a question about the height, or actually have a comment and a question about the height issue. First of all, I think the shadow study is useful, and I'm glad you provided it. But there was a question that was brought up before that's, I guess, related somewhat to the shadow study. It's not, but it's not the same thing. It's with respect to sight lines. So there is a difference, and your shadow study basically concludes that there's not much difference between a 4-story building and a 6-story building. That's fine. But there is a difference in sight lines between a 4-story building and a 6-story building. And the residents behind, not necessarily the townhome residents, maybe the townhome home residents, but certainly the single-family home residents behind, has there been any thought to the sight lines that are going to occur on a 6-story building? Are they going to be looking down into the backyards of these homes, or the back porches, or the living rooms that sit in the back of these homes, compared to a 4-story building where there would be, the sight lines would be lower?
So let's ignore the rooftop just for this conversation. I don't know that we've studied that issue, but rather than focusing on the number of floors, I'll focus on the number of feet. And so if we're talking about a 10-foot difference between a 52-foot top and a 62-foot top, I'm hard-pressed to imagine there's a meaningful difference a block away. Our neighbors at the townhomes, I think they're going to have, I mean, it's, the angle is such that I think, I don't think that there's a difference there. Whereas I think the kind of the angle, I don't believe that there's a difference if I'm 52 feet high or I'm 62 feet high and I'm looking down. This is a looking down question as I understand it.
Right.
I'm going to look down from either one into that space just because of the proximity to it. Whereas being a block away, as I think about the geometry of it, it's extending out more. There may be some difference, but it's going to depend on season and tree cover or that. But there is no question that if someone's up higher, they're going to be able to look down and see something.
Additionally, on the height, there was a point, and you addressed it, about the trees on the top floor.
Yes.
And I think the way that the drawings or the schematics are done, the trees do look like they go above the 7th floor pool house.
They're never going to grow that large. So, I mean, the rendering is fiction.
Well, how do we know that they would never grow that large? I guess the point is, my point is, why wouldn't you simply just address the issue? That if the residents feel that there's a concern and it doesn't add a whole lot to the shadowing, that's fine. But why not just commit to saying, look, whatever is put there is going to be consistent with the height or lower than the height of the building, and so it's not going to present an issue at all.
Fine.
Right.
Not a problem.
I think it's more of a visual impact, not from those residents, but when you look at that rendering from Central and Park, the trees are they're really screening the view of that amenity space, that floor from.
But you're asking us to just limit the cap.
In a positive way, right? I think the resident brought it up as that it could increase the shading effect,
Right.
or potentially increase the shading effect if it got higher. Maybe nature would allow it to get higher.
If I understand, we're talking about leaving the trees or something like the trees in place, but managing the height of it so that it doesn't overshoot the elevation.
My point is the amount of soil you require up there to get trees of that height are probably going to make it structurally not impossible, but extremely expensive to do so. So you really are looking at something that's more of an ornamental tree up there as opposed to a shade tree, if you're providing trees up there.
Yeah, we were going to put honey locusts up there.
Right, I think what I heard is that the goal is to screen. That's
Yes.
to screen. It's not to increase the height in any way or
Absolutely.
impact the shadowing in any way.
That's exactly right.
Other comments?
I think she covered
I've got several. I think you're overreaching with the building height. I don't have a problem with the 62-foot height, but then to top that with an amenities penthouse and an elevator overrun that bumps us up to 81 feet is excessive. And I think you really need to take a look at how important is that amenities penthouse to you. Because if you don't have the amenities penthouse, then the elevator overrun certainly drops back down into a manageable level. So I would put it back to you, trade-off. 6 stories of residence and and no amenities penthouse, or 5 stories of residence and an amenities penthouse. And that's something you're going to have to look at from an economic standpoint. But I just don't see us granting both. And I've got a couple of other, sort of minor refinements too. I appreciate the move to shift back 6 inches, to shift the building 6 inches back towards the north to get a little bit of a planting area along the wall on Central. 6 inches is not going to be enough. I think you need to rethink that entire wall in terms of the articulation. It's not a particularly pedestrian-friendly environment. I see no reason why you need to get a 1-foot variance to increase the height of the...
I'm sorry, say that.
Why you need a 1-foot variance to increase the height of the wall from the permitted 6 foot 5 inches to, or 6.5 feet to 7.5 feet. And then I would also, in looking at your requested exceptions on page 34 of your handout tonight, the last one says to allow the use of reflective, tinted, or colored glass. I certainly would discourage the use of reflective glass.
What we're proposing is the glass, we actually didn't circulate the samples we have, I realize, but the glass that we presented after a conversation with Mr. Adler, we realized that for the glass sample we were proposing, which is a tinted, which is a colored glass, that we need to have an exception for it.
Okay.
I just want to, I apologize for being a little scattershot, but you brought that to my mind. It's been there's been mixed reviews on the architectural quality of what you've designed previously, and I appreciate and I agree with beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but that doesn't mean that we should not insist on the highest quality materials, the highest quality design standards, architectural standards, and that, notwithstanding that this is obviously a much more contemporary design, it should still maintain a timelessness, which I think I hear some of the critiques of your other project in the village being maybe a lack of timelessness and a lack of durability through the use of maybe lower, not the highest quality materials. So I would certainly encourage you to use them here, and I would think we would require that. And again, just from an architectural standpoint, I think it's important to respect and respond to the environment that you are fitting into.
Yeah, and I would like to sort of build on that. I think the village is fortunate to have Optima considering developing this property. And I consider Optima to be a very high-quality developer. And in general, properties that you've developed, I think, are of high quality and high design. I happen to like the design of the building. It may be a little bit too brown for my taste, but I certainly was in favor of the Village Center development when that was done several years ago, and actually spoke in favor of it. So I like the work that your firm does. I like buildings that have a modern aesthetic to it. So, I would encourage the dialogue to continue, and let's work on the refinements.
Yeah.
One of the issues that came up a lot today was the affordable housing, and it's great that you have an approach for that said it could be for people living in the city or people who work in the city, insinuating that it's people in different suburbs, not that live in different suburbs, benefiting from it. And just pushing back, I imagine in your building, the first floor is going to be a much lower price point than some of the higher floors. It's abutting against a wall on Central Avenue, correct? How far would that discount have to be to meet the standards of affordable housing on the floor as you model it? Don't know?
Enormous. Enormous. Like, probably close to a third of the rent.
And there's 9 units on the ground floor, correct?
But again, our design is intended to create benefits for each one of those units. And notwithstanding the chairman's comments, part of the intent of the amenity deck is it affords every resident of the building wonderful views.
Could there be a staircase to a terrace up there as opposed to an elevator?
No.
You get into issues of accessibility.
Yeah.
ADA requires it.
Any other comments for this evening? Then I'd like to entertain a motion to continue this case to February 4th meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, this case is continued to our February 4th meeting.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
And any other discussions? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
You did the second.
All those in favor?
Yeah, aye.
Okay. Before we all disperse, if we could just take 2 minutes here.
You just adjourned.
Okay. After we've adjourned, before we disperse,
You can't talk about public business.
I'm not talking about public
Okay.
business.
Making me nervous.
I'm very aware of the Open Meetings Act. A lot of us have never had the opportunity of meeting each other. So I was hoping we could take 5 minutes, which is not talking about public business.
That's perfectly fine.
And just sort of go around the table and just, introduce ourselves, tell us, a little bit about